Drow, also called Dark Elves, Deep Elves, Night Elves, Under Elves, and the Dark Ones by Orcs, are dark-skinned subrace of elves, mainly living in the Underdark. They are feared and disliked for their cruelty, although some non-evil and a few good Drow do exist. In many aspects, Drow resemble other elves or Eladrin. Their bodies are wiry and athletic, with chiseled and attractive faces, though they are shorter and thinner than other elven subraces. Due to generations of selective breeding, especially among their nobility, Drow appear attractive even compared to other elven subraces. While their alluring looks can be used for seduction, they often use it to instill fear. The goblin Nodgheim noted that the surface race's beauty standards make them more lenient and accepting of the Drow, overlooking their deeds. Reports on physical differences between Drow sexes vary. Some say females are generally bigger and stronger than males, while others claim males have superior strength. Drow skin tones range from dark gray, jet black, and obsidian to various shades of blue, with albino Drow known as the Zarkai being exceptionally rare. Drow have white, black, or purple teeth, with their gums, tongues, and throats being red, pink, or purple. Drow eyes can be any color, with bright red being the most common. Pale shades that appear nearly white of blue, lilac, pink, or silver are also frequent. Drow with green, brown, black, amber, or rose-hued eyes exist, but they are rare. Purple or blue eyes indicate surface elves and/or human ancestry. The color of a Drow's eyes can also indicate their current mental or physical state. Drow eyes redden when they are angry and turn yellow when they are sick, poisoned, or under some negative magical influence. Drow hair can be stark white, pale yellow, and more rarely, silver or copper in color. It thins and changes color with age, turning pale yellow for women and silver or gray for men. Due to the Elistraean ritual of the Run, Drow of other faiths often say that silver hair is a sign of mental handicap. Drow generally keep their hair long and decorate it with pins and webbing made of precious metals. They are incapable of growing proper beards, but some males manage to grow long sideburns or even tufts of wispy hair on their cheek or chin. Most Drow wear a piwafwi, a fire-resistant protective cloak, along with footwear that function as boots of elven kind, with a Drow house insignia. The insignia indicates the house or merchant clan to which a Drow belongs, either as a member or servant. However, insignias are not openly displayed except within the house territory or the clan's base, with the exception of the first house. Noble Drow wear clothes and equipment of superior quality, except when they wish to avoid attracting attention. For instance, a noble's house insignia not only shows their house allegiance, but also carries magic that can be used on command. Web chokers are considered fashionable by Drow priestesses, who also use powdered ormu, an Underdark moss, as their eyeshadow. Compared to other sentient beings, Drow are notably intelligent, as having an analytical mindset and being observant is crucial for survival in their society. Intellect, along with force of personality, are mental traits that have been ruthlessly selected for in their civilization over many generations. However, a lifetime of indoctrination with Lolth's dogma, combined with limited contact with other beings, surroundings, and alternative ways of life, make them close-minded and leave them with little worldly experience. The Drow, fittingly for the dark perversions of elves they embody, are decadent and hedonistic beings, with a love for what they consider beautiful and a desire to surround themselves with it, generally without regard for the cost of acquiring it. For example, they are often lecherous, taking lovers at their leisure and discarding them on a whim. They do often try to hide their more heinous traits behind a veneer of sophistication. The moral code of the average Drow is informed by the teachings of Lolth. From birth, Drow are taught that they are superior to other races and believe themselves to be the ultimate beings. This mindset creates such strong arrogance that they often cannot view other creatures as their equals, including other Drow. Almost every Drow believes themselves to be the epitome of their superior species. The treatment reserved for non-Drow ranges from pets to slaves to grudgingly respected partners if they prove themselves a military match, though never their equals. In this atmosphere of condescension, most Drow feel entitled to whatever they want, whenever they want it. If a Drow is not where they believe they should be, their pride demands they blame someone else for their incorrect position. They are taught to crush those beneath them, as cruelty is seen as a method of self-validation. If someone cannot defend themselves, they deserve the cruelty inflicted upon them, proving the superiority of the Drow performing the torment. If they are a vengeful people by necessity, as not answering slights with punishment is perceived as a weakness by other Drow, essentially inviting exploitation, abuse, or even death. Most Drow seek to rise in rank, desiring the power over others that the higher station provides. Ironically, for a race that emphasizes individual merit, personal achievement and ability hold little intrinsic value to them. Military genius, battle skill, magical capability, creativity, and other talents have no inherent worth. The concept of a passion for one's career and valuing an activity for its own sake is alien to them. Abilities and resources, whether obtained through training or granted by birth, only matter insofar as they increase a Drow's potential to advance their rank, thereby granting them more power over others. Given the scarcity of resources in the Underdark and the limited opportunities for advancement, most Drow are aggressively competitive. They have a propensity for violence, which is their preferred, even instinctive form of conflict resolution, and they manage to restrain this urge only when waiting for a more opportune moment to strike. In a Lolthite society, Drow cannot afford to show emotions like compassion or love, as these are easily exploited. They often prefer emotional cruelty over physical harm. The constant strife they endure makes them paranoid. They fear everything from the potential loss of their personal position, Lolth's favor, the loyalty of their inferiors, and the punishment of their superiors. Being raised in this environment results in Drow becoming untrusting sadists with a constant readiness to betray others, both figuratively and literally. They are emotionally stunted with a tenuous grasp on sanity, valuing cunning and deviousness over mental stability. Most Drow are incapable of trusting other creatures, regardless of their race, and they're taught from an early age to advance at the expense of others through treachery or even murder, though never acting overtly. Even in moments of safety or relaxation, they remain alert and expect attacks, rarely being surprised when such attacks occur. While Drow understand the advantage of forming bonds with others, they do not see the value in honesty. Forming friendships is dangerous and often temporary, as any alliance or cordial relationship can end in treachery. Drow typically enter such engagements expecting the worst, with alliances constantly scrutinized for signs of betrayal and often ending violently. These alliances are generally formed when the supposed ally is susceptible to blackmail, considered weak enough not to be a serious threat, or when cooperation is forced upon them by a common enemy. The mere inconvenience of maintaining the bond could be reason enough to break it. Despite being a chaotic race in a society focused on individual advancement at the expense of others, most Drow lean towards being neutral evil in alignment. They are contradictory in outlook, cooperating to some degree almost in spite of their nature. They encourage personal ambition and innovative problem solving, while paradoxically placing the good of the many over the good of the individual and reinforcing staunch traditionalism. To achieve their individual desires, Drow society retains some level of stability, held tightly to tradition, even if not codified into law. Drow respond poorly to social norms turned into written rules, obeying them primarily out of fear and social pressure. This leads to a phenomenon where a lone Drow can drift toward chaos, while a Drow community is forced to work together against one another, setting up rules to stabilize the power structure and allowing for cooperation beyond what chaos typically creates. Unlike other creatures such as orcs, Drow have no innate inclination towards evil. Their morality is shaped by their society. So-called good Drow make up about 15% of their entire race on Toril, although most of them are actually chaotic neutral or lawful rather than truly good. Within Lolthite societies, even Drow inclined towards goodness struggle to develop a strong personal sense of morality. They generally behave like their evil counterparts due to social pressure, as any sign of softness can be lethal and often results in their death. Only truly exceptional good Drow, such as Drizzt Do'Urden, are capable of escaping Lolthite society. Most are found out and sacrificed to Lolth, and those who do manage to leave their settlements often die in the dangerous wilderness of the Underdark. Even those who escape the cruelties of the Underdark find it difficult to form long-term friendships and must constantly be on the lookout for pursuers who could kill them. Drow are more agile than most humanoid races. They also have a higher than normal tolerance for poison due to prolonged exposure over countless generations. Their resistance in descending order includes non-Drow sleep poisons, drugs, insect venom, and injected poisons. However, they have no special tolerance for contact poisons or poison gases. They possess a significant resistance to magic, with adults overcoming magical effects around half the time. During infancy, this resistance fluctuates between being almost non-existent and youth level, stabilizing as they mature. It increases again upon reaching adulthood and can be even further trained. Even if a Drow's magic resistance is overcome, they can handle special magical attacks quite well, with a better chance than other races at resisting them, especially spells that attempt to bend their will. Drow have a natural aptitude for audible mimicry, allowing them to easily imitate the sound and tone of another person in a believable manner, especially if it's a voice they are frequently exposed to. Drow are as delicate as other elves and have a keen interest in stealth and subtlety. They often ambush their foes with ranged weapons, preferring hand crossbows to deliver poisons from a distance. In melee combat, they favor light and swift weapons like rapiers, but typically retreat if close combat is their only option. Rogues receive specific training, including how to blend in with heat hues and the patterns of their surroundings, similar to how other races hide in the shadows. Their renowned assassin schools also function as assassin's guilds. Male Drow are usually skilled fighters, and rangers are highly valued as scouts. In addition to its obvious use as a light source, Drow use their ability to create dancing lights to surprise enemies with the sudden appearance of a glowing figure or will-o-wisp-like balls. Collaborating with actual will-o-wisp to enhance its effect is a known tactic, although it's considered corrupt behavior. Beyond the obvious benefit of canceling light sources, the Drow ability to create darkness is a crucial element of their combat strategy, as it can be used to limit visibility or hinder their enemies. Since magical darkness appears like black stone when viewed with dark vision, it has many tactical uses. For instance, a Drow can hide behind the black stone to ambush enemies or to conceal a pitfall. Like dancing lights, fairy fire can serve as a distraction, but its ability to change colors also allows for the creation of color signals for long-distance communication. Lolth-touch Drow sometimes train to slip into the cover of their created darkness, or learn to strike the targets of darkfire not only more accurately, but also with greater force, similar to the techniques used by Drow wanderers. The Drow have several combat styles. Bautha Zahim emphasizes evasion, flanking, and surrounding a single enemy, usually a monster, with superior numbers and agility. It's favored by rogues and clerics of Elastre and Veyrune. Drow Velve involves using two swords and can only be mastered by those with the talent and luxury for formal education. It is used by Drizzt Do'Urden. Jiv Golhir is a technique used to force enemies into humiliating positions, favored by priestesses of Lolth. Kione Veldren focuses on the use of the darkness ability. Hjorlin Plyn is used to capture opponents alive, favored by conservative fighters, priestesses of Lolth, and slavers, all for different reasons. Luth Allure is a style of ranged combat. Orb Allure concentrates on striking multiple opponents with one attack. Practitioners of this style are valued and granted special privileges. Findar Strieka is not a style, but a term for mindless violence used in battle. It is utilized by Drow berserkers and followers of Gaunadur. Sarg Elk focuses on the Drow's natural agility and use of one-handed weapons. Accessible to poor without education options, it is also used by clerics of Kiaran Sali, Lolth, and Veyrune. Ust Sreen emphasizes striking first and quickly, reacting at the beginning of a fight. Zar Thalak is a mounted combat style used by cavalry. Zresa Thalak emphasizes physical strength over accuracy and is favored by the followers of Selvatarn. Drow weapons and armor are crafted from a substance called adamantine, an alloy of adamantite, and then transformed into Drowcraft items. This equipment cannot withstand sunlight, but is inexpensive and easy to produce. Before the 1370s, every Drow warrior, even those of the lowest rank, wore Drowcraft chainmail and usually carried a buckler as well. However, during the 1370s, these items lost their popularity, and the Drow began to wear mithril armor when they could afford it, choosing armor that would not hinder their natural dexterity. Renowned weapons include bolts of power, the Death Lance, the Whip of Fangs, the Drow Mission Blade, the Hand Spinneret, and the Queen Scourge. One well-known Drow-made piece of gear is Death Armor, legendary in the Underdark. The Drow also create weapons specifically to combat their own kind, such as flash globes and light pellets. Among the Underdark races, the Drow are the most proficient in using poisons and toxins. Particularly famous is the potent Drow knockout poison, made from a slippery black fungus found in certain Underdark caverns and commonly applied to crossbow bolts to quickly put enemies to sleep. Other popular poisons include those extracted from purple worms, scorpions, and spiders, as well as substances known as calling, eyeburn paste, and skull rot. Almost every Drow dedicates individual effort to strengthening their tolerance to poisons as part of their training. They do this by ingesting increasing doses of Drow sleep poison and spider venom, which grants them further resistance to the toxins. Their extensive use of poisons and magic have led them to develop techniques to enchant weapons, enhancing the effects of any toxin applied to them. Naturally, the Drow have countermeasures against poison, such as the Ring of Anti-Venom. In Drow societies, priestesses formally occupy positions of military leadership, but in practice, male commanders actually lead the forces. The priestesses often hide in the face of danger, resorting to corporal threats and magic domination to ensure loyalty. A military squad formerly led by a male drow is either a Striach, a suicide squad, or a Dobluth, a group of outcasts. When drow nobles engage in warfare against each other, the attacking side must eradicate the entire enemy family in a single strike. If even one member of the defending family survives, they can seek so-called justice, causing the entire city to turn against the attackers. Alliances are prohibited in these attacks, and there is a mandatory interim period of 1 year between attacks on a single house, allowing time for recovery. Prolonged covert warfare, such as through assassination, is tolerated for a limited time. Eventually, if a feud goes on long enough, the Drow City's ruling council may force the two houses to engage in open war until a victor is decided. This dynamic keeps Drow Society in a constant state of small-scale underhandedness rather than large-scale battles. During wars, noble houses scheme against one another, ensuring that rivals suffer the heaviest losses or bear the blame for any failures, preventing a united front against enemies. War in the Underdark is vastly different from war on the surface. The confined spaces of the subterranean environment make it difficult to assemble large armies, resulting in frequent skirmishes between small units or patrols. The Drow avoid large sieges and pitched battles, preferring these skirmishes with hit-and-run tactics and harrying strikes. Underground warfare involves utilizing the natural environment as a weapon. This includes creating tunnels to flank your enemies, causing cave-ins, altering the flow of magma, and other such tactics. The Drow excel at ambushes, exploiting existing dangers like loose rocks, and are skilled in using traps, such as strategically placed phycamids or containers filled with Ascomoid spores to gain an edge in combat. They effectively respond to their enemies' actions, including spellcasting. Patrol members coordinate using their infravision and a timing method called hand fades based on how long it takes a rock to lose all heat after being touched. However, they are often aggressive and impatient, making them susceptible to taunts that can provoke fatal mistakes. Their method of warfare, especially if they start utilizing slaves and allies, can extend conflicts for years. While the exact equipment and size of Drow warbands vary, some general assumptions can be made about their composition. A typical Drow patrol consists of 7 to 12 soldiers, led by a patrol leader and overseen by a commander. The commander typically has up to 3 individuals accompanying them, who may be acolytes, apprentices, or bodyguards. Standard patrols include a mix of up to 6 Drow with basic training, while the remainder are elite warriors. These warbands usually feature both male and female Drow, and a patrol composed solely of one gender often indicates heightened tension between the sexes in their city. Patrol leaders are generally male Drow with exceptional combat skills or clerics trained in weapon use. Larger patrols are typically led by female Drow, often with 1 or 2 powerful warriors serving as lieutenants. Elite patrols are usually commanded by a female cleric with female bodyguards and acolytes who are also female clerics from the same church. These elite patrols include an additional cleric responsible for healing duties and acting as a spy for the Church of Lolth. A pincer refers to a group of several patrols, 2 to 4, led by a commander, often a spellcaster, known as an overleader or battle captain, who has up to 4 lieutenants called webmasters. Higher-ranking leaders such as battle lords or war mistresses have an entire patrol force as their bodyguard, who also carry their magical items. Each house maintains a standing army of Drow soldiers, priestesses, and wizards, which includes contingents of non-Drow slaves, usually bugbears, ogres, and minotaurs. Drow patrols will sometimes include some non-Drow members, such as bugbears, goblins, or orcs as allied forces. Mind flayers are never part of these groups, except when being escorted to a destination. When a Drow dies in battle, they are sometimes reanimated as zombies if the lower half of their body remains functional. This is done to prevent the corpse from being plundered, provide a means of self-transportation, offer transportation for injured and immobile bodies, and to create useful shock troops for battle. All warriors in a patrol typically carry short swords, daggers, up to 3 javelins, with an atl to extend their reach, a hand crossbow with 10 poisoned darts, and a buckler for self-protection. Patrol leaders are equipped with a hand crossbow, javelins, and a moderately enchanted mace to signify their authority. During wartime, patrols double the number of poisoned darts, and every warrior carries up to 3 healing potion in rust-resistant steel vials. Patrols are often equipped with the Scroll of Protection from Earth and Stone to guard against cave-ins, while surface raiders or underground stealth attackers use an Orb of Duo Dimension to enable covert attacks. Lolthite Drow Society has 2 primary goals known as the first and second part of the Destiny of the People. The first goal involves conquering the Underdark and forcing all other races into subservience, while the second aims to drive the entire elven population into extinction, seizing their lands and holdings. Lolth insists that to achieve these goals, the Drow must engage in perpetual infighting and violent competition, believing that constant conflict strengthens them and weeds out indolence and other weaknesses. However, this extreme attitude hinders the Drow from achieving these purposes, preventing significant growth. Despite her rhetoric, Lolth has no real intention of having the Drow devote themselves to these goals. She enjoys their infighting too much to focus their attention on taking the surface. On a personal level, each Drow strives to gain and maintain Lolth's favor, amass material wealth and slaves, and gain status within their society. The station of a Drow influences the kind of plans they support and execute. Higher-ranking Drow back endeavors that boost their own prestige by increasing people's power and influence. Lower-ranking Drow support plans that cause strife and violence within their communities, dragging everyone down. Drow communities, usually referred to as city-states, are not organized as states as such, but rather clusters of Drow led by oppressive theocratic nobility. These cities are usually independently governed and not part of a larger Drow kingdom or nation. While some have trade agreements, they frequently engage in wars with one another. Cities typically include farmlands where slaves produce and harvest meat and crops, usually located inside the main cavern, but sometimes outside due to space constraints. Drow architecture, like typical elven constructions, emphasizes beauty and is considered a marvel. The Drow excel at shaping and hollowing out stalactites, stalagmites, and cave columns. They are known for their designs of stone bridges, balconies, buttresses, and intricate spiral tunnels. Suspension bridges are common due to their ability to withstand earthquakes, and cave fishers are trained to sling their lines for construction purposes. The Drow use the Underdark's environment as material for their architecture, incorporating growing sedimentary structures into their buildings. They particularly value magomorphic clear black stone, which allows creatures with dark vision to see through it. In some cities, clay is used by the poor to create dwellings, similar to its use in Karatur and the Shar. The wealthy use clay to create temporary furniture and sculptures for parties, decorating them with gems, glowing fungi, and other similar materials. Noble Drow typically live in mansions, while commoners reside in small caves or walled circular houses with dugout cellars and adobe-like construction, all designed to be as beautiful as possible. Despite their excellent craftsmanship, Drow cities tend to appear chaotic and disorganized due to the lack of a uniform architectural style. Common features include spider webs in passages and building layouts, and frequent obsidian-cast spider motifs as decorations. Lighting is primarily achieved through magical means, with a continual fairy fire spell adorning many impressive structures, city-state borders, wealthy buildings, and slave working areas outside the city. Magic plays a crucial role in Drow architecture, with many structures supported by spells rather than solid construction, leading to collapses when the magic wears off. In such events, slaves clear the rubble, and the Drow use magic like stone shape and minimal handiwork for reconstruction. This haphazard approach results in persistent instability issues in Drow cities. Drow are mostly encountered in the Upper Dark, but most of their cities are found in the Middle Dark for protection against surface aggression. Traveling down to the Middle Dark with an army from the surface is impractical. The gates of a Drow city and many of its important buildings usually have Jade Spider guardians. Drow city-states in the Underdark are strategically located based on several criteria. The caverns must be vast to allow a horizontal city layout with ample nearby resources like iron, adamantine, and gems. The magnetic force and phase rest must be particularly strong, both for practical reasons and because, according to Kile Veladorn, the Drow have a mental compulsion to be near it. When phase rest disappears, the Drow city itself has been known to collapse. Phase rest radiation near Drow cities provides protection for magical spying via divination and complicates or even endangers teleportation within the area. It also facilitates the cheap and easy creation of magical Drowcraft items and has several defensive uses. Drow often use Shriekers, a type of fungi growing in phase rest-rich places, to warn of incoming danger. However, the Drow reliance on phase rest is also a vulnerability. Their settlements are often stationary, making them relatively easy to locate and susceptible to attacks by various forces in the Underdark. The radiation can cause mutations in other creatures. A flying roper might be born in a phase rest-rich environment. If these mutations result in more powerful creatures, the Drow avoid fighting them, instead keeping them in specific areas to act as unwitting sentries against invaders. If the mutated creature resembles a spider, the Drow praise it as the work of Lolth and occasionally feed it captives or lured adventurers. A specialty among the Drow is their ability to cut and shape stone using both magical and mundane methods to create smooth-flowing buildings. Their waterworks in particular receive universal acclaim. They construct intricately curved pipes that bore through solid rock, fitted with shut-off valves, side channels, and pumps to collect and divert water for various purposes, including consumption, industrial use, and waste disposal. The valves consist of large, hollow stone spheres with two opposed holes, closely fitted into a basin with inlet and outlet channels. These spheres are attached to a large, counterweighted lever. When turned, the lever aligns the inlet and outlet channels with holes in the valve, allowing water to flow through. The flow is regulated by opening a sliding panel, which turns the spheres so that only the volume of water filling it can pass through and be diverted to the side channel. The pumps used in these systems come in two varieties: a corkscrew type, which operates by water pressure, and a piston type, which is operated by slaves. Magic is constantly applied to ensure the water seals function perfectly. Most members of the Lolthite Drow Society live under oppression, in a state of perpetual desperation and poverty. Commoners typically learn to craft or enter military training, while talented individuals may aspire to enter one of the magic schools. Ironically, commoners often have multi-generational households, as their relatives have less to gain from their deaths, resulting in families with many living generations. Elders who are not feeble are usually spared from being killed, as they hold valuable historical and general knowledge. However, in cases of overpopulation, the elderly might be eaten. Commoners who gain significant expertise in a particular area, like Zaknafein Duordan did as a warrior, might be adopted into a noble family. Occasionally, artists are adopted by one of the houses for their skill. Commoners can also rise to a higher social station by becoming the consort of a noble, adopting the noble's last name for the duration of their marriage. Consort bonds are generally temporary due to accidental breaches of etiquette, the noble's disinterest, or being used as pawns in political games of Lolthite society. The outcome is usually a painful death or expulsion, often the former. Rising through the ranks too quickly is dangerous for any drow, as it typically leads to temporary alliances among those who feel wronged, aiming to bring down an upstart. These alliances are often successful. Nonetheless, noble drow value commoners more than slaves, and usually sacrifice them only if a slave is not available. Drow are ruled by their aristocracy. The drow houses make up families with the strength and influence to occupy the best lands. Most houses are located close to each other, hoarding the best territory and resources, while the rest of the population is forced to fend for themselves. The priestesses of Lolth, who usually reign over drow societies, are poor rulers, leading to a haphazard city organization. Noble houses constantly fight each other and are characterized by internal strife, as expected in a society following the way of Lolth. Although the power dynamics among many houses change frequently, the few at the very top usually remain stable. A good indicator of a drow house's power is the grandeur of their domain, with the biggest and grandest villas belonging to the greatest houses, and a public temple to Lolth often built within the strongest family's territory. The infighting among drow houses not only paralyzes the growth of their cities, but also actively undermines opportunities for development to ensure that those below them don't gain power and potentially turn away from Lolth. Drow houses are funded by powerful individuals with special abilities, whose traits are passed down to their offspring and further augmented with magical items. Within a family, noble drow parents view their children as vehicles for their own advancement, including sacrificing them for potential gain. Noble drow families band together for mutual protection, not out of affection. They stay with their family as children to protect themselves from outside violence, and as adults because houses are useful tools for societal advancement. The head of a noble house in Lolthite Drow Society is the Matron Mother, a powerful priestess of Lolth. Below her are the female members of the house, who are also priestesses, ranked by influence. Male officers follow, including the Weapon Master, House Wizard, and Patron, although these roles can be combined. Next are other male members of the house, such as War Leaders, who answer to the Weapon Master, and House Mages, subordinate to the House Wizard. Below the non-officer males, who are typically of the house's bloodline, are the servants and slaves. Positions are generally sorted by age, but can be changed at the Matron Mother's whims. Females hold absolute power within their household and control both governmental and military power within the city, though they gain authority only after puberty. Males only gain authority if they become officers. A Matron Mother typically loses her position only if murdered by her eldest daughter, a sign often interpreted as Lolth's disfavor, which can lead to potential changes in the house's direction or its destruction. Lolthite Drow Society is a theocracy, with ultimate power vested in the ruling priestesses, especially the Matron Mothers. The society operates under the principle of might makes right, with priestesses serving as judge, jury, and executioner. Priestesses have the authority to arrest and punish people for assumed offenses, often inventing methods of punishment on the spot. The only way to lessen a punishment is if the presumed criminal has connections to those with whom the punishing priestess might consider a threat. Priestesses in Lolthite Drow Society derive their power from the Spider Queen, making the Way of Lolth the actual basis of their laws. They enforce Lolth's dogma, which becomes the main law. One primary tenet is that Lolth is the only true goddess, and anyone worshipping another deity or practicing a different faith must be sacrificed to her. Non-Drow caught in ritual worship face a heavy fine and temporary exile for the first offense, with the death penalty for a second offense. For Drow, worshipping another deity is an immediate death penalty. Uttering another god's name is frowned upon, but not a punishable offense. Violence and property crime are punished not because they are seen as morally wrong, but because they disrupt social order. A Drow vandal, thief, or burglar might face charges, but the stolen goods are not recovered, as failure to defend property is viewed as forfeiting a right to it. Street patrols punish those involved in fights, but the victim is expected to defend themselves. Open murder by Drow houses is punished, as are failed assassinations, but not because of the acts themselves, but because public fighting is considered uncouth. Drow law serves as a formal excuse for cruelty, disguising the chaotic, ruthless, and ambitious nature of their society. There are no consistent criteria for justice, and punishments can be wildly disproportionate to the crime. Justice is arbitrary and capricious, with no due process or appeal system, unless one can leverage connections. Certain acts carry penalties, but the real crime is getting caught. In Lolthite Drow Society, defying hierarchy is considered a serious violation of the Way of Lolth. This includes actions such as killing spiders, slaves disobeying their owners, commoners refusing orders from priestesses, and students rejecting the courting of a matron or female teacher. Drow Society also enforces a strict fashion code, including rules about hairstyles, to easily identify a Drow's social station and house. Violating this code by wearing the wrong hairstyle, clothes, or house insignia is a crime unless authorized by the house or permitted by the matron mother. It is also illegal for non-Drow to disguise themselves as specific Drow, noble Drow, or members of another house. Other offenses include failing to completely exterminate the noble line of another house in a single attack, multiple houses teaming up to attack another, and attacking a house within a year of the last attack against them. Given the capricious nature of Drow law, punishments for various offenses, especially defying one's superiors, range from immediate execution, death by torture, torture without death, mutilation, castration, imprisonment, exile, forced labor, whipping, and exorbitant fines. Whipping and torture are the most common penalties since the priestesses enjoy punishments that can be inflicted multiple times. Violating the fashion code, unless authorized by appropriate individuals, always results in death. Under Lolth's dogma, female Drow are recognized as more valuable than males, who are considered worthless. This gives female Drow absolute power over males and makes them less likely to be sacrificed. However, while it might seem that female Drow have it easier compared to males, this is an illusion. In a society where rank equates to power, and power is everything, a prestigious position comes at a high cost. Drow ambition combined with Lolth's teachings means that competition among female Drow, particularly those from powerful houses, is violent, aggressive, and often lethal. Women seeking power outside of Lolth's church face even greater challenges, competing both with other females and oppressed, resentful men. Males who aspire to positions of power in Lolthite Drow society often resort to treacherous means like the ruling women. They typically try to curry favor with women, attempting to advance their station by attaching themselves to powerful females. Some aim to secure high officer positions or become the consort of a powerful matron mother. In Drow society, courting is dominated by women, and any attempt by a male to initiate a relationship is seen as insubordination, often resulting in execution by torture and sacrifice. Women choose their partners as animals are selected for breeding, with males expected to comply without resistance. Males have no say when the relationship starts or ends, while females have complete control, at least in theory. When a male is desired by more than one female, the women compete over him. This is not advantageous for the male, as a losing female might decide that if she can't have him, no one can. It is not uncommon for a female to give up on a male, only to flay him and leave his corpse in a rival's bedchamber. A discarded male is more likely to end up dead than left alone. Among commoner Drow and non-Lolthite societies, relationships are less extreme. The concept of marriage exists, but it is not permanent, with contracts typically lasting around a decade and subject to renewal. Merchant clans follow similar rules, but marrying into a clan means lifelong membership, and attempting to leave can be as dangerous as inviting death. A successful long-term relationship between Drow is likely not based on love, but practicality, such as complementary careers, political influence, attractiveness, or the male's history of fathering many female offspring. Any actual affection usually stems from the male being attractive, obedient, and never embarrassing the female. The best normal romantic relationship between two Drow resembles that between a spoiled brat and her well-trained, obedient dog. with the owner retaining the right to put the dog down for any reason. Arcane magic offers a route to power for male drow, though only to a select few. While they remain socially inferior to female drow, they are less likely to be killed by a priestess compared to male war commanders who face execution for perceived insults and failure. Males can also gain status by becoming an arcane devotee or an arachnomancer, taking advantage of the reverence for spiders associated with Lolth worship. However, these roles do not usually provide additional safety. Male clerics exist among the Drow, but in Lolth-dominated cities, they are targets of female followers and are barred by Lolth from achieving significant power. They serve in low-ranking positions under lethal risks, and while they can become divine disciples, this often leads to their death at the hands of priestesses. Other Drow deities have different gender approaches. Gaunadar has no gender restrictions, while Veyron's faith has a gender barrier, making it harder for women to become clerics. Elistray accepts clergy of all genders and races, though before the 1370s, her clerics could only be female. This is not due to any supposed inferiority of males, but because becoming one required a deeper understanding and sensitivity to, quote, the life of the other gender. Male priests had to spend time as females, not just during the ritual, which is called the change dance, but in everyday ways. During the 1370s, Elistray began opening the priesthood up to males, and after the Second Sundering, her clergy could be accessed by people of any gender with equal ease. Given the need to compete for limited resources and advancement opportunities, Drow have a complex and often harsh relationship with their children. While they recognize that children are the future of their race, Drow society is primarily driven by mutual exploitation between parent and child. An honest bond of love is exceedingly rare, and children are used as tools as long as they are deemed useful. Children born with physical imperfections are killed shortly after birth due to the Drow's obsession with beauty. Drow parents instill virtues of tenacity, cruelty, ambition, self-reliance, and independence in their children. Traits like kindness and compassion are considered dangerous and exploitable, leading to harsh punishments for children who display such weaknesses. Punishments range from beatings to neglect, such as withholding food, intended to prepare children for the cruelty they will face in adulthood. These punishments can even be lethal, justified as saving the child from a worse fate as an adult. Children learn cruelty and bloodthirstiness as survival mechanisms, and these lessons scar them for life. Noble Drow children are rarely raised by their parents. Instead, they are cared for by elder siblings and private caretakers before being sent into the city's priesthood, military, or wizarding academy, depending on gender and inclination. These institutions function like boarding schools for children over 10, allowing them to return home only once per year for important family or religious meetings. Merchant clans and commoners, lacking resources for private tutoring, consider child-rearing a family duty, with children learning their parents' craft or joining the military or clerical academies. Whether noble or commoner, Drow children generally lack strong parental bonds, both physically and emotionally distant from their absentee parents. This limits their emotional growth compared to what might be achieved in a more nurturing environment typical of surface societies. The Drow hold a grudging respect for races capable of resisting their aggressions and may perceive certain races as possible equals, though never superiors. These races can be involved in mutual gain or non-aggression pacts with the Drow. However, contracts with the so-called lesser races are not considered binding by the Drow and are broken as soon as they cease to be beneficial. As a result, other races anticipate betrayal and prepare countermeasures against Drow treachery. Generally, the Drow have poor opinions of their allies, viewing other races as laughable or contemptible at best. Ultimately, the Drow view other races as either targets for extermination or potential slaves, foes to be dominated or eradicated. This extremist mentality leads them to wage war on new neighbors to subjugate or eliminate them. Prisoners from such conflicts become slaves in Drow cities. Typically, between half and two-thirds of a Drow settlement's population consists of slaves or other non-Drow without rights. Only houses possess significant numbers of slaves, and in some cases, the number of slaves may be on par with or exceed the house's Drow population. The surface inhabitants of Toril know very little about the Drow. To the average person, they are a distant problem, considered more a myth than reality. Since Drow are ineffective in bright light, they remain inactive on the surface during the day. Only a small number of surface inhabitants have superficial knowledge of the Drow, knowing of them merely as inhabitants of the Underdark who conduct raids on the surface. However, elves and Eladrin, with their close historical connections, have more in-depth knowledge. This lack of awareness has allowed individual Drow to enter surface communities without immediate hostility, provided they avoid drawing attention that might lead knowledgeable individuals to recognize and eliminate the threat they pose. Despite the general prohibition of Drow in surface cities due to their notorious reputation, followers of Elistray sometimes manage to integrate into surface communities. Their unique appearance and negative public image make it nearly impossible for them to effectively replenish their resources on the surface. The Drow frequently encounter aboleths in their allies, which usually leads to war. Unlike other races whose desires and utility the Drow can intuit, aboleth thoughts follow alien patterns, and their environment is unappealing and uninhabitable for the Drow. They would ignore the aboleths if not for their habit of taking slaves and minions from both the Dark Elves and their victims. Moreover, the Drow are somewhat terrified of aboleths, who can strip away free will and turn them into mindless slaves. Aboleth minions are immune to the intimidation tactics the Drow typically use. As a result, they often employ brutal hit-and-run tactics against aboleths unless they can agree to avoid each other. However, an increasing number of both aboleths and Drow find common ground in their veneration of Ganadar. The majority of both races view his worship as heretical or treasonous, leading the outcasts of these very different species to frequently join forces, creating cities that are difficult to assail by land or sea. The Araneas, sometimes referred to as Werespiders, are a magical race of sentient, shape-changing spider-like creatures which inhabit the spider swamp of Calimshan. Though they are not true lycanthropes, they can transform between a humanoid appearance and that of a giant monstrous spider. Their humanoid form typically resembles a Kalashite human, a Kalashite half-elf, or in rare cases a drow. The specific form and gender they can assume are fixed at birth. In their natural form, Araneas appear as giant humpback spiders with some subtle differences. They possess a pair of short arms with many-jointed fingers and double-jointed thumbs extending from below their mandibles. Their brain is not located in their head segment, but rather in a large hump on their back. They can also take on a third hybrid form. This form is a humanoid, but includes sharp fangs, spinnerets in their hands, and 4 eyes instead of 2. Occasionally, the hybrid form may also have additional arms, but never more than 8 in total. They are inherently magical beings and can cast spells similar to a sorcerer or dragon. They prefer using illusion, enchantment, and charm spells, and they avoid casting fire spells. In both their hybrid and natural forms, they possess poisonous bites and the ability to throw webs. They typically avoid combat, but when forced to fight, they utilize their webs and spells to immobilize or distract the most powerful opponents first. They prefer to take prisoners and exchange them for ransom rather than killing them. In their humanoid disguises, they trade silk, herbs, and poisons with nearby settlements like Almraven and Volothamp. In 1370, the group secretly worked for the Silver Star's trading coster of Saradush. According to legend, Kalashite wizards created the Aranea during the Night Wars to infiltrate the Drow armies. After the wars ended, the Werespiders were hunted down and either killed or driven into the spider swamp, where they became a neutral, pacifistic people. Initially, they could only change into Drow, but over time, they gained the ability to transform into Kalashite humans or half-elves. This allowed them to return to human cities incognito and expand from Calimshan into the wider world. From there, they began facilitating trade in silks, herbs, and poisons with the coastal city of Volothamp. During the Eye Tyrant Wars of the 5th Age of Calimshan, the Aranea temporarily abandoned their pacifism to fight against the Beholder armies from the Alamir Mountains, who sought to conquer the forests of Mir. The Aranea allied with the Kalashite forces long enough to repel the Eye Tyrants before turning on their temporary allies. Over 800 years after their banishment in 290, Kisara Shun V blamed the Aranea for a plague raging in Almraven, leading to their near extermination by Volothamp's military. During this time, some Aranea adopted the worship of Zanasu, a demon lord of spiders, for protection, and came to inhabit a city once called Ajhutal in the swamp. 2 years later, Kisara banished Zanasu back to the Abyss, causing a gradual degradation of Aranea society as the priests of Zanasu desperately awaited for their god's return for the next 1,000 years. Unbeknownst to them, Selvatarm had defeated Zanasu and stolen his divine essence, though the Araneas still remained relatively peaceful. Araneas are viewed by the Drow as traitors to Lolth according to their mythology. Some stories depict them as Drider-like beings, punished with an arachnid shape for failing Lolth, while others suggest they were Lolth's first attempt at creating life before she perfected it with the Drow. In either case, they are seen as feeble-minded for not following the Spider Queen. Powerful Drow seek to use them as slaves, while others, swallowing their pride, hire or cooperate with them to achieve specific goals, often planning to betray them later. Unusually for generally pacifistic beings, the Aranea harbor a burning hatred for the Drow, resenting their narcissism and tendency to enslave or slaughter them, especially when the former proves ineffective. Nonetheless, if offered fair enough games, they will cooperate with them as readily as any other race. Beholders are often sought out by the Drow as allies for the additional protection these aberrations can offer to their communities. The Drow encourage Beholders to make their lairs outside their settlements, providing a formidable defense against potential threats. The No, a type of sentient stalactite-like creature, are also said to have been created by the Dark Elves. These creatures have been known to ally with the Drow when they pose a significant threat to a clan. Acting as sentries for outposts and communities, they devour Drow that do not belong to the area they protect. Some Bino also serve as bodyguards for specific Drow, moving through the caverns and attacking any perceived threats. Chitines are humanoids resembling spiders found in the Underdark. They stand about the size of a halfling and have 4 arms, each with an extra joint. Their hands and feet are embedded with claws, allowing them to climb most surfaces. Their faces feature faceted eyes and mandibles attached to their mouths. Chitines can spin webs from an opening in their stomach, and their skin secretes oil, preventing them from sticking to their own webs. When possible, they use their webs to create pitfall traps to catch enemies by surprise. Their ambidexterity and the hooks in their hands make them extremely difficult to disarm. However, they are sensitive to sunlight and bright lights. They often wear armor made from their own hardened webs. They skillfully use their webbing to construct their homes and typically reside in villages of about 40 to 60 individuals within a cavern filled with maze-like webs connecting domed houses on the walls, ceilings, and floors. At the center of the cavern is always a temple to Lolth. The leaders of each village are known as Choldriths, Chitine priests of a different species. They do not practice arcane magic. They are found throughout the upper and middle Northdark, with the majority living in several interconnected villages, at least 7 in total, known collectively as Yathchol, located beneath the far forests. Some drow houses, including House Melarn in Menzoberranzan and inhabitants of Shamath, keep Chitines as slaves. A few of them also reside in the Spiderhaunt Wood in Shadowdale. In the 13th century, they were created by the wizards of House Mylil in Chednasad as a failed slave experiment. In the year of the Creeping Fang, 1305, the Chitines rebelled against drow enslavement and established Yathchol. In the year of Wild Magic, 1372, the Forgotten Ones, Driders of Tlindet, negotiated a defense pact with a group of Chitines planning to attack the settlement. In the same year, some nobles from a drow house were spared destruction because they were out on a Chitine hunt during the fall of Chednasad. In the year of Risen Elfkin, 1375, the Selvatarn-worshipping drow Dairn agreed to provide the secrets of creating Chitines to the Draco-Lich Dargathoth in exchange for magical items and the use of Dol Blunde as a base of operations. Choldriths are the priestly race of the Chitines. They have 8 slender legs, with the front 2 serving as arms, and resemble bloated white spiders that tower over normal humanoids. Their faces share similarities with Chitines, featuring some humanoid traits, faceted eyes, and mandibles protruding from their mouths. Their ears look like horns. In battle, Choldriths often use their Chitine subordinates as fodder to shield themselves while they cast clerical spells. They can spin webs like spiders and can throw net-like webs to ensnare foes. Their bite is also highly venomous. They are known to make up around 1/10 the population in Yathchol. It is believed that Lolth herself created the Choldriths. Transformation into one is considered by the Chitines a twisted reward from the Spider Queen for those who pass her tests, similar to how transformation into a Drider is punishment for failing her tests. Chitines are created by the Drow of Chednasad through their breeding experiments using Elven and or Dwarven stock, utilizing a mix of arcane, divine, and magical pact rituals. Some Chitines manage to escape into the Underdark. While the Drow have continued to create Chitines as needed, most independent ones refuse to cooperate with them unless they're planning a hostile surprise for their former slave masters. The two groups often kill each other on sight. Although Lolth still favors the Drow, she sometimes pits both groups against each other in order to punish the Dark Elves for past insubordinations. Choldriths occasionally emerge from Chitine transformation rituals. Initially seen as beneficial due to their ability to lay eggs and increase their population, they are actually spawned from Lolth's displeasure. Completely devoted to Lolth, Choldriths persuade Chitines to rebel against their Drow masters. If a Chitine creation ritual results in a Choldrith, it is killed immediately in Drow settlements. Deep dragons, similar to beholders, are often approached by Drow for alliances. However, the Dark Elves can just as easily become their greatest adversaries. These dragons are typically found in the Upper Dark and Middle Dark, especially near Drow cities, and frequently collaborate with them as guardians in return for regular food supplies, usually captives, criminals, and slaves. Yet deep dragons can choose to remain arrogantly and maliciously distant at their whim. They view Drow as useful tools and excellent sources of so-called trinkets or magical items, but are aware of the potential danger they pose. While disruption in their food and magic supply is a concern, deep dragons are generally pleased when the Drow engage in significant infighting. This internal strife weakens the Drow, preventing them from dominating the Underdark and easing the dragon's fears of a dark elf hegemony. Demons have an unusual relationship with the Drow. Unlike most mortals, the Drow do not fear demons, as their own goddess resides in the abyss. They respect the demon's power and appreciate their goddess's connection to their home. Drow summon demons when they desire something, and demons respond when they seek something in return. They enlist demon services to boost their prestige or gain an advantage over their enemies, while demons aim to spread death, execute cunning plans, or gain Lolth's favor. As long as both sides benefit, these arrangements typically conclude without conflict. They are the ultimate slaves for a noble house, showcasing the owner's power and intimidating their enemies by displaying one on chains. They are also prized as guests, adding significance to major sacrifices, lavish banquets, and the dedication of a newborn daughter to Lolth. Such gatherings, although intended to be peaceful, can quickly turn into scenes of degenerate debauchery. Sometimes they engage in rituals that result in horrific demonic half-breeds like Dragloss. Despite generally stable relations, it is crucial to remember that abyssal demons are not to be trifled with. Occasionally, a Drow's attempt to summon a demon can go awry. This can be due to insufficient precautions, a cunning demonic trick, or the demon overpowering the summoner. Such failures often lead to a demon running amok. In Drow Society, failing to control a summoned demon is a capital offense, typically resulting in the doom of not only the caster, but their entire house. The Disir, a race of subterranean corpse-like scavengers, harbor fanatical hatred for anything nearby. Rather than creating their own homes, they often take over those of others, making them a scourge among the tunneling races. The Drow are a significant threat to their survival, as any unity among the Dark Elves would create a power imbalance that could lead to their extinction. Driders are Drow transformed from the waist down to have the body of a spider. This transformation is usually a punishment for failing a test of Lolth. The creation of Driders is a painful process, resulting in increased physical strength, while retaining all magical and other abilities and skills acquired during their lives. Driders resemble Centaurs, with the upper body of a Drow, but the lower body replaced by the abdomen and legs of a giant spider. They are sexless because Lolth did not want to create a race that could potentially become enemies of the Drow. They are bloodthirsty creatures, retaining their memories and personalities from their time as Drow, but their transformation adds a sense of shame, hatred, and fear, making them violent hunters. Many Driders harbor a death wish, preferring to die in battle, especially against Drow. They are relentless hunters for two main reasons. Hunting gives their lives meaning, and they must drink blood at least once every 4 days to prevent their bodies from deteriorating, which can lead to death outside of combat. Due to frequent betrayals and killings by Drow after making deals with Driders, they have learned to take precautions to ensure that they can at least take the Drow with them at the time of their death. They naturally produce venom that can weaken their victims and paralyze them for up to 20 minutes. They can also deliver this venom through a bite or use it as a sticky coating on their weapons. They are immune to all poisons. Due to their death wish and unstable mental state, they rarely feel fear. They can climb like spiders, although they are too heavy to walk upside down on ceilings. Approximately half the Drider population can spin webs like spiders. These webs function like a rope of entanglement and are hazardous to everyone except the Drider who created them. While their dark vision range is shorter than that of a Drow, they have sharper overall senses. All Driders possess the innate ability to cast a variety of spells, including Clairaudience, Clairvoyance, Dancing Lights, Darkness, Detect Good, Detect Law, Detect Magic, Dispel Magic, Fairy Fire, Levitate, and Suggestion. Darren once exploited this by convincing Driders that these abilities marked them as blessed creatures of Lolth, similar to powerful Drow, to gain their support. In addition to these innate abilities, Driders can cast spells like clerics, sorcerers, or wizards. Cleric-like Driders can cast spells from the chaos, destruction, evil, and trickery domains. Driders who cast spells like sorcerers often learn spells such as Daze, Ghost Sound, Lightning Bolt, Mage Hand, Ray of Enfeeblement, Read Magic, Silent Image, and Web. Driders also have some resistance to magic, although not as strong as that of Drow. They have a knack for hiding and sneaking, making them adept ambushers. They frequently set up traps and prepare ambush sites around their lairs. Although they can use weapons, they rarely wear armor. When they do, it is primarily for protection against ranged attacks. After their transformation, they leave their home city in shame, becoming outcasts to Drow Society. Typically they live alone, but they can also be found in pairs or groups, accompanied by 7 to a dozen monstrous spiders. The ritual to create a Drider involves channeling Lolth's power through a demon during a ritual. Only Drow can be transformed into them, although the change can be undone with a wish spell. When a Lolthite Drow attains a certain level of power, they must undergo a test of Lolth, administered by Lolth herself. Those who fail the test but survive are turned into Driders by the Spider Queen. The second way Driders are created involves Drow mages. Lolth's clergy ensure society aligns with their vision by suspecting and monitoring mages. Once mages reach a certain level of power, they are abducted and subjected to a loyalty test. Those who fail are transformed into Driders by a Lolthite priestess with magical energy channeled directly from Lolth. The third category arises when Lolth summons a promising Drow to the Demonweb pits. These Drow undergo a test by the Spider Queen, and those who fail are transformed and sent back. Despite the cultural rejection of Driders, some wizards and sorcerers have developed a spell called Drider Shape, allowing them to transform into them temporarily. Individual Driders can be found outside of Drow Society, in various locations, including other planes of existence, and on Spelljammer pirate ships in the Sea of Night. They retain any languages they knew as Drow, but often the transformation makes Drow sign difficult for them to use. They are held in low regard by Drow. When transformed, they leave either Drow cities on their own, are penned in specific areas, or are driven out to live as hermits and hunters. However, they sometimes return to the outskirts of cities, where they are tolerated as a representation of Lolth's will and a reminder of the consequences of failing to meet the Spider Queen's standards. On the city's fringes, they also serve as a buffer and guardian by killing potential intruders. Feared and shunned, Driders are considered outcasts, even lower than slaves. Upon defying or failing the Spider Queen, they are stripped of all status, relationships, and possessions. While initially driven from their cities, their presence is tolerated if they return, serving as a living example of the fate that befalls those who fail Lolth. Drow sometimes confine Driders in certain areas to act as lines of defense. They harbor intense hatred for the Drow and derive great satisfaction from slaying them. Occasionally, outcast Drow or entire communities seek out Driders, offering tasks in exchange for rewards. However, due to the Drow's notorious treachery and often impossible expectations, these interactions frequently end with the Drider's death. Many, anticipating such a betrayal, prepare contingencies to ensure that they can take as many Drow down with them as possible. Dwarves have long been traditional enemies of the Drow, with their enmity beginning as soon as the Drow descended into the Underdark. To establish their new territories, the Drow immediately launched wars to seize dwarven magic items, which they then used against the dwarves. Drow craftsmanship, though not inherently inferior, often pales in comparison to dwarven constructions due to the Dark Elves' preference for style over substance and their short-sightedness. Where dwarves would build reliable, long-lasting structures, the Drow often create something aesthetically pleasing, but vulnerable and dangerous to its occupants. Both Drow and dwarves share similarities such as low birth rates, wealth, and territoriality. However, these similarities are more of a source of conflict than common ground. They compete for the same resources, such as veins of metallic ore and gemstones, with each side willing to steal from the other. Drow often let the dwarves, including the Dwergar, do the hard work of mining before taking over the land, while dwarven raiding parties are known to, quote, liberate mineral deposits unearthed by Drow magic. Persistent Drow attacks are met with the stubborn fury of the dwarves, leading to frequent skirmishes and even prolonged wars. Both sides enlist various allies to develop new magic and manipulate the earth to gain an advantage over their ancient foes. While most Drow harbor hatred for all other races, their deepest animosity is reserved for the Seldarine and the Surface Elves, particularly Moon and Sun Elves, whom they refer to as fairies or Darthir, meaning traitors in the Drow language. From a young age, Drow children are taught that any problems or injustices they face are ultimately the fault of the Surface Elves. This hatred is not merely taught, but ingrained, with the names of Surface Elves instinctively cursed and used as a litany during times of pain and hardship. Drow legends about their exile vary, but they commonly believe they were unjustly punished by the elven gods and unfairly banished into the Underdark. In some of the more brutal retellings, Surface Elves are depicted as embodiments of deception and malice, merciless killers who responded to their innocent kin's request for peace with ceaseless violence, even massacring children and the elderly in their quest to dominate the surface world. These fabricated tales paint Surface Elves as utterly worthless and hateful, even towards each other. Many Drow prefer stories that portray their descent into the Underdark as a voluntary act, and their transformation as a gift from Lolth, which satisfies their pride. Ironically, the Church of Lolth tends to suppress myths that cast the Drow as the superior party during their descent. By doing so, they maintain the populace's hatred of the surface elves, fueling their sense of persecution and giving them a vile ambition to strive for and finally besting them. Even in tales when they are depicted as winning the conflict, they are still punished by the Seldarine, who coddle the losing surface elves and exile the Drow for their success. The presence of surface elves unite the Drow in mutual hatred, with the annihilation of them being a central goal of mainstream Drow culture. While many of them harbor this animosity, some have become so accustomed to life in the Underdark that they prefer to stay there and make the best of it. Despite this, the Drow eagerly seize any opportunity to inflict pain and death on all elves, conducting surface raids expressly for the purpose of killing and enslaving them. Surface elves reciprocate this hatred. Their loathing of the Drow borders on obsession. Elven stories of Lolth's betrayal and the Drow's brutal raids serve as centuries' worth of indoctrination. No surface race hates the Drow more than the elves. Even the most open-minded elves struggle to tolerate a Drow regardless of any proof of their goodness, as even that can be seen as deceit. This is especially true for Sun Elves, who hold their dark cousins in absolute contempt, seeing them as abominations and attacking them on sight. Grimlocks, who are intensely distrustful and xenophobic due to the atrocities they suffer in the Underdark, are another group targeted by the Drow. One of the horrors they face is enslavement, making them prime targets for raiding parties that seek out large slave populations. Kuo-toa were initially enemies of the Drow, with their first encounters resulting in the Dark Elves killing the Kuo-toa on sight. This dynamic shifted after a Drow-hating faction in Sorath Nusum, a significant center of Kuo-toa politics, overthrew the ruling council and slaughtered every Drow trader in the city. The Drow responded swiftly and brutally, with mercenaries and aquatic spiders eliminating all Kuo-toa in the city and ensuring they never returned. Following this event, the various Kuo-toa clergies declared all Drow to be honorary Kuo-toa and welcomed them into their settlements, except for restricted areas like churches and spawning pools. This policy has extended to servitors, slaves, and allies of the Drow, which has led to mutually beneficial trading agreements and relatively friendly relations, with mixed settlements becoming common. Kuo-toa have refrained from attacking the Drow or their servants on sight, and the Drow, in turn, have avoided openly enslaving the Kuo-toa or taking too many of them captive. Despite these practices, the relationship between them remains strictly professional. The Kuo-toa fear and hate the Drow, but collaborate with them for their useful goods and services. The Drow, on the other hand, look down on the Kuo-toa, but view their weeding out of the weak as a way to avoid the decadence and laziness that plague the fishmen. Libdulpulp, the Kuo-toa goddess, punished non-Kuo-toa entering her realm without proper tribute by making the offender kill a certain number of Drow. A lone member of either race has to be cautious in the company of the other, especially if their disappearance is unlikely to be noticed. Many Kuo-toa communities remained intact largely because the Drow, due to their internal conflicts, rarely commit fully to their attacks. However, the Kuo-toa were still a significant threat to them. The cautious peace between the two races has masked a deep-seated animosity, which has led to something of a Cold War, characterized by numerous minor skirmishes, subtle acts of sabotage, kidnappings, and efforts to out-colonize ancient sites. This ongoing conflict has persisted for centuries. Astute scholars have speculated that a three-way conflict exists between the Drow, Kuo-toa, and Mind Flayers. This constant state of tension and rivalry is believed to be one of the reasons why none of these groups has been able to dominate the surface realm. Illithids and Drow are both formidable entities in the Underdark. Neither race admits the other's superiority, yet both perceive each other as a significant threat. The Drow consider Illithids an inferior race, similar to the Dwergar, but worthy of respect due to their powerful cities and military strength. They recognize the danger posed by Illithid communities. This respect is tinged with fear, similar to their feelings towards aboleths, as Illithids who consume brains threaten the Drow with the loss of self. Enslaved Drow can use cunning to improve their situation, but a Drow thrall is merely a shell, likely a future meal, incapable of self-preservation, leading most Drow to prefer death over such a fate. Mind Flayers, for their part, treat Drow respectfully when necessary, though never deferentially. They are highly interested in the Dark Elves' schemes. While Illithids don't fear the Drow, they acknowledge their own vulnerability and, like the Drow, avoid an all-out war. The Drow have high natural resistances to the Illithids' mental powers, and even if they failed to destroy the Elder Brain, a Drow raiding party could devastate a colony. However, alliances between Drow and Illithids are unstable due to mutual distrust, and such partnerships can be perilous, as shown by the fate of House Nokwar. The Drow encounter Mind Flayers more frequently than aboleths due to territorial competition, leading to a rivalry marked by raids and skirmishes. Both sides see the other as a means to greater power. The Drow view all other Underdark inhabitants as rivals for power and resources, while the mind flayers see the Drow as little more valuable than other non-illithids, destined for enslavement and consumption, albeit left for last. The Drow rarely keep animals as pets, favoring creatures that fully understand their dependence on their masters. Instead, many Drow take a favored slave as a personal servant or thrall, treating them as something like a pet. However, they do domesticate various animals for different purposes and utilize molds, fungi, and oozes as traps and for sanitation. The Drow have an affinity for bats of all kinds, both carnivorous and herbivorous. Carnivorous bats will consume insects and small flying creatures of the Underdark, while herbivorous bats are either adapted to feed on Underdark fungi or require fruit imported from the surface, making them accessible only to the wealthiest and most influential Drow. Bats of all sizes and breeds serve multiple functions, including as spies, scouts, alarms, combatants, and messengers. Their ability to navigate using sound makes them highly effective in the Underdark, although most Drow owners use fairy fire to call their trained bats home. They are also kept as pets, with the smallest varieties often housed in cages by young Drow children who can form genuine attachments to them. These pets are sometimes killed by relatives or rivals to teach children that such attachments are a weakness or simply out of cruelty. Drow wizards frequently use various types of bats, including giant bats, deep bats, and mo-bats as familiars. Larger bats are kept in small rooms within Drow mansions, where slaves frequently clean to remove the smell. Dire bats are sometimes bred for combat in cruel dogfights that spur many Drow wagers. Some communities use them as flying mounts, although this is dangerous and typically commoners, even children, are forced to ride them, ensuring minimal loss if either the rider or steed perished. They are trained to be steered using a bit and bridle, while the riders learn to hold on to the harness to avoid falling. The riders usually conduct scouting missions or harass enemies with poisoned crossbow bolts. At first glance, Cavekkaans resemble dogs from the surface realms of Toril, but they have a few distinct characteristics. Instead of fur, they have smooth black skin, with a texture somewhat like velvet. Their ears stand upright naturally, and their noses feature an upturned, spade-shaped protuberance. Cavekkaans, like surface bats, have weak eyesight. They are nearsighted, and similar to the Drow, they can be temporarily blinded by light. To compensate for their poor vision, they possess exceptionally sensitive hearing. Because of these keen senses, which are highly effective in the pitch-black caverns of the Underdark, they are often used by Drow as hunting animals. They are rarely kept as pets, except when taken in by deep gnomes, and more commonly serve as working animals. In the wild, they act as scavengers and show notable curiosity, often settling near Drow communities. They hunt in packs and are known to bring down much larger prey, including humanoids. Also known as cave dogs, they have learned to coexist with beings like the Drow. Due to their superior senses compared to the Drow, they use them as guards or hunting dogs, capturing them as pups to train them. Their scent tracking ability rivals that of bloodhounds. Subterranean lizards of various types are commonly domesticated by the Drow, often bred for specific purposes. Those used as mounts or pack animals are selected for traits like sticky pads. Larger, slower breeds, such as pack lizards, serve as beasts of burden. Riding lizards, with their steady gait, balance, and wall-walking abilities, are ideal mounts for Drow patrols. Notable individuals like capable warriors, nobles, and mercenaries use them as their steeds. Most houses have at least a few, with larger ones boasting entire squadrons of lizard cavalry. Unlike human knights, these Drow patrols silently traverse cave ceilings, launching crossbow bolts at their enemies. By the time the enemy realizes what's happening, most are already dead or unconscious. These lizards also have a keen sense of smell and are trained to follow silent directions, compensating for their inability to see in the dark, and can move without leaving obvious and readable heat prints. A Shrieker is a type of violent fungus known for emitting strange and loud noises to lure prey. Shriekers are human-sized mushrooms. They resemble violet fungi, but lack the ability to move or poison prey with tentacles. They produce a loud, piercing scream that attracts curious creatures or adventurers. They are immune to the poison of violet fungi. They can sense nearby motion or light and respond with their characteristic shriek, which lasts between 5 and 15 seconds. A patch of Shriekers depends on violet fungi to kill prey with poison, as they cannot attack or move on their own. Like violet fungi, they feed on the breakdown of organic matter that falls nearby. They thrive in underground environments. Besides being found in large numbers in the Underdark, they also grow on the Illithid homeworld. The flooded forest provides a sufficiently dark environment for Shriekers to grow as well. By the late 14th century, they filled the Nemesaur Tunnel, an ancient highway in the Underdark that was once part of Shanatar. They are sometimes intentionally placed to act as intruder alarms. House de Vere planted a Shrieker among every 5th mushroom surrounding its compound to ward off potential attackers. Shriekers are poisonous to most creatures if consumed as food. However, the stomachs of hook horrors have adapted to digest them without issue. They are also known to be eaten by purple worms, shambling mounds, and medusae. Cultists of Moander can also consume Shriekers without being affected by their poisonous flesh. The cultists who resided within the ruined city of Ulash in the 14th century grew Shriekers as a food source. Some consider their spores to be a vital ingredient in brewing potions of plant control. In Cormyr, mushroom hunters often glaze fairy caps with the fur of hedgehog Shriekers, making the mushrooms fetch twice their normal price. Although they are fungi and not animals, some are kept as pets by eccentric drow communities that worship demons or strange gods. There are many varieties, each of which emits a different sound. They are relatively easy to care for and can be trained to recognize specific creatures. If they grow too large or become unruly, they can be eaten, and some drow take pleasure in eating them alive, savoring their screams as if they were those of a surface elf. Like Shriekers, slaves are not technically animals, but young nobles often adopt them as so-called pets. Trolls are sometimes among the creatures treated this way, and children are particularly likely to pick a pet if the being was physically small or perceived as unintelligent, such as goblins and kobolds. Although the lives of child slaves are relatively pampered compared to ordinary servants, they are still treated as little more than animals. Their lives are always at risk, and many are neglected or forgotten for weeks at a time, either as punishment or simply out of disinterest. Some are tortured to death when the child tires of them, and these so-called pets are easily replaceable in Drow society. Snakes are common companions for drow, including both constrictors and venomous serpents. Drow torturers often extract venom from their pet snakes to increase their victims' suffering. Younger drow, especially priestesses in training, sometimes keep small constrictors as pets and feed them humanoid flesh to train them. Spitting snakes are also placed in cages on high shelves to spew venom at intruders. Both venomous and spitting snakes are also used as familiars by drow wizards. Snakes are generally favored creatures among Lolthites, ranking just below arachnids in sanctity. Drow who die without the favor of Lolth are said to reincarnate as either. Snakes who die while protecting a temple to Lolth are used to create whips of fangs. Spiders are the symbol of Lolth and hold a special place in Drow society, serving various roles depending on their size. Very small spiders are kept as pets by children in layers made of metal and glass. Those big enough to kill mice serve as familiars or roam the streets acting as pest control. Dog-sized spiders sometimes serve as temple guards and can be resurrected and bound to spider demons upon their death, while horse-sized spiders are used as steeds. Due to the difficulty of training unintelligent vermin, spiders in drow communities are often specifically bred for their purpose. Drow cities aren't filled with spiders solely because of their faith. Drow have a natural affinity for spiders, and spiders are naturally attracted to them, leading to large concentrations even in communities that don't worship Lolth. Lolthite dogma forbids harming spiders, with such acts being punished by torture and death. However, some sources suggest that the drow emulate spiders rather than revere them, ruthlessly preying on even their own kin. Hurting spiders is still somewhat taboo and can be used against a drow by their superiors. Their attitude may be more indifferent until it becomes inconvenient for them. Some drow families even ceremoniously eat spiders before a meal to give thanks to the Spider Queen. Apart from the most basic among them, drow are a literate race. As typical for elves, drow speech is eloquent and almost musical. Most drow know only 2 languages, Deep Drow and Sign Language, as they usually remain in their cities and have limited exposure to other tongues. However, drow adventurers, outcasts, and slave traders often learn additional languages, as do their warriors. Drow are also known for their skill in reading subtle markings in stone to leave secret messages. Drow names frequently include double letters and are intended to be pleasing to the ear. They believe that first names similar to those of the Dark Seldarine bring bad luck, and names resembling their patrons are considered blasphemous. Nobles typically avoid names that sound too similar to common Deep Drow. Drow surnames never begin with the L sound, as this is reserved for the Spider Queen's avatar. Having a surname generally indicates that the individual was born into a noble family or holds a rank in a role, such as a weapon master in a household. Drow who do not meet these criteria generally don't have surnames. The everyday language of the Drow is commonly known as Deep Drow, Low Drow, or Drowic. This is an Elven dialect similar in structure to Common and Undercommon, with many borrowed words from other languages like Orcish, Dwarven, and human tongues. In Drow Sign Language, the meaning of a word is conveyed by the hand and finger patterns, while tenses and the links between subject and object in a sentence are expressed through the exact angle of the hands from the body. Emotion and emphasis are added through stance, body language, and facial expressions. For example, Camuriel Oblodra's particular way of waggling his thumb at the end of a sentence indicated his deep contempt for humans, and Drizzt Do'Urden, folding his arms across his chest, signaled peace. Mesbaris Armgo indicated a question by popping her left thumb at the end of a statement. There is no vocal component in Drow Sign Language. It is a complete and comprehensive language with a full vocabulary expressed visually. It can be difficult for anyone other than the intended recipient to interpret a signed message, and nearly impossible to decipher for someone not fluent. While spoken languages often have more variation or range of expression, Drow Sign is capable of delivering a significant amount of complex information in a relatively short amount of time. Elements of Drow Sign Language can even be conveyed through normal body language and typical movements, allowing those with sufficient skill to pass secret messages unnoticed. High Drow is an archaic dialect that priestesses of Lolth learn to communicate without others understanding them. It conveys information through both spoken words and specific gestures. Many Drow are proficient in Undercommon as well, the trade language of the Underdark. Drow who have the time or inclination, such as warriors, often learn the languages of creatures that live near their communities. These include Abyssal, Common, Draconic, and Goblin, as well as languages spoken in nearby surface areas. The Drow have various customs and gestures. For instance, dropping held weapons and falling to a knee signifies surrender. They also have many rituals, such as graduation ceremonies for a mage, priest, or warrior. In meetings, creating an intense light source is perceived as a hostile act by the Drow due to their light sensitivity, and this can lead to an attack. Other known rituals include the Blooding, which is a coming-of-age event where a Drow kills a dangerous or sentient surface creature. The Iliyitri is a formal dance that sometimes serves as a platform to display wealth and power, often through elaborate costume. The Nedera is a dancing competition where those who misstep are marked with harmless fairy fire. The Running is an annual ritual in which Drow raiders massacre a surface community. The Test of Lolth, sometimes simply referred to as the Test, are a series of rites of passage and loyalty tests for Lolthite Drow, especially wizards, who reach a certain level of power and knowledge. Successful priestesses are promoted, while those who fail are turned into Driders. Spider hunting is a hide-and-seek game played by young Drow and is a courting ritual during festivals. The demand for art and skilled craftsmanship among the Drow is high, particularly for exquisitely forged weapons. Good artisans, especially innovative ones, are highly sought after by the noble houses. Families that lack artistic talent often acquire it from outside, either through hiring, coercion, or the rare adoption into the family. Noble households often have exclusive craftsmen like sculptors and gem cutters. Despite a relatively high number of capable artisans, there's still a significant shortage compared to demand, leading both nobles and merchant clans to try to maintain at least 6 artisans on their payroll. Artisans are among the most cunning and paranoid Drow, using devices like clothes with built-in items, gas-powered needle throwers, extra mechanical hands, and wire saws to defend themselves and escape from any captivity. Drow artwork and craftwork often utilizes materials like metal and cloth, frequently featuring spider motifs. Noble houses are often adorned with curtains designed to resemble spider webs. An art form unique to the Drow is the use of continual fairy fire spells to create murals or highlight temples. What the Drow call base powers are abilities that Drow can cast without formal schooling, requiring only simple practice. These abilities vary slightly from person to person due to factors like genetics, personal talent, and divine favor. Drow magical abilities are somehow tied to the phase res, the magical radiation of the Underdark, and its intensity at a Drow's birthplace can influence their base powers. These abilities also fluctuate within the same individual depending on their mental and physical health, age, and degree of training. For example, a dying Drow can double the effectiveness of their innate powers by supercharging them with their own life force. Spells like Dispel Magic can end a base power's effect. Normally, Drow cannot continue using these abilities when they start using another or begin casting a spell. A common or untrained Drow cannot use or maintain their innate abilities under light as bright or brighter than sunlight, as it impedes their concentration. Upon reaching a sufficient degree of expertise, Drow gain their so-called mature powers. These include the spell-like abilities Detect Magic, Know Alignment, and Levitate. Particularly intelligent and powerful Drow can maintain 2 inborn abilities at once. Like with their base powers, it is normally impossible to cast mature powers in the presence of sunlight. Some Drow are born with more magical power than usual, allowing them early access to their mature powers. These Drow usually make up the noble class of their society, where the trait is dominant. Unlike commoners, nobles can attempt to cast their inborn abilities even in the presence of light, although they can only maintain one of their spells under such conditions. Before the 1360s, Drow would gradually lose their base and mature powers, as well as their defenses against magic if exposed to sunlight. However, during the 1360s, Lyriel Bainray, guided by Elestrae, carved her rune in the child of the Yggdrasil with the intent of preserving her own drow magic away from the Underdark. This act inadvertently allowed all drow to retain their powers on the surface. Despite Elestrae's guidance, there is speculation that Lolth also had a hand in the event. Lolth-touched powers are the result of Lolth's blessing, and perhaps the most distinctive abilities of the drow. Lolth's touch gives her control over the entire drow race, and overcoming it is only possible by becoming a redeemed drow who is judged worthy by Corellon. Lolth-touched drow exhibit abilities like Cloud of Darkness, which engulfs the drow in shadows that only they can see through, and Darkfire, which makes targets easier to hit by enveloping them in harmless purple flames. These abilities seem to draw from the same source, and are exhausting for the drow, with only the more experienced and trained drow able to cast both separately. With training, drow can develop webs of darkness that slow and obstruct foes, while also limiting their vision. Curseborn drow can access even more Lolth-touched powers, including enhancements to the Cloud of Darkness and Darkfire abilities. Further improvements can be achieved through training, allowing the Cloud of Darkness to be cast more quickly in response to danger, or transforming Darkfire into a flickering, protective shroud that makes the drow harder to hit. Lolth, also known as the Queen of Spiders and the Queen of the Demonweb Pits, is the most influential goddess of the drow within the pantheon of the Dark Seldarine. Lolth can either appear as a giant black-eyed widow spider, or a tall, beautiful female drow, often garbed entirely in clinging spiders or sometimes in drow chainmail dresses or tunics. The form most commonly found in the Abyss, thought to be her true form, is a combination of the others, a giant spider with the head of a coldly beautiful female drow. Lolth is a goddess of cold cruelty, adapting perfectly in the darkest depths of the Abyss, reveling in betrayal and bloodshed, and toying with everyone from her minions to her victims. She not only enjoys, but thrives upon torture, destruction, and death, whether personally performing it or being an indirect cause. Every interaction is ultimately done with malice, ill will seething from her every move, and even those who know her well can be surprised by the depths of her viciousness. Her malevolence can be compared to the rage of the brutal orc deity Gruumsh, but whereas his fury is mindlessly violent as a force of nature, her malice is more complex and deliberate. Gruumsh's hate is steady and constant, whereas Lolth's is utterly capricious. Lolth demands absolute loyalty and obedience from all drow, and questioning her motives or wisdom is considered a sin. This applies even to male drow, despite her considering them unclean, and she takes vengeful notice if one abandons her faith. She also secretly desires the worship of other types of elves and humans, enjoying corrupting them into her service even more than causing torment and devastation. In contrast, she foments unending chaos among the drow, constantly setting them against each other. Ostensibly, this weeds out the weak and complacent, leaving only the strongest, cruelest, and most devious to serve her. But it also serves as a source of her own amusement and a way to assert her supremacy. Despite her demands for loyalty, those who blindly obey Lolth's demands often find themselves quickly led to their deaths. Lolth's capricious nature means that there are few hard and fast rules and much uncertainty about her desires. The successful must pay attention to her ever-changing wants, as her favor is fickle. Those she does play favorites with often find her turning on them without warning. The Spider Queen is technically capable of displays of kindness and aiding those she fancies, always giving one chance for the disfavored to redeem themselves, but this usually means a dangerous mission, and sometimes just silently watching their next move. She cannot be relied upon, and her ultimate motivation is almost always manipulative. Lolth's promotion of infighting among her worshippers leads many to believe she is insane, and this assessment is not entirely baseless. Since her fall from grace, her sanity has frayed and fractured, transforming her into the petty, conniving monster she is commonly known as. Her will is not just fluid, but often contradictory. Even if she is mad, the drow place more importance on a deep and devious sense of cunning than mental stability. Ironically, for all her demands of obedience, nothing demands her attention and admiration more than treachery, even towards herself. Guile and political ruthlessness are the signs of her favorite servants, and she ultimately admires ambition more than loyalty. Dark Seldarine, the pantheon of the drow, is led by Lolth the Spider Queen, in the sense that she is the most powerful and widely worshipped drow deity. She dominates the lives of the drow and urges them into constant fighting. While opposed to varying degrees by the rest of the pantheon, Lolth does not share her power with other gods. In Lolth-worshipping city-states like Menzoberranzan, her priesthood's reign is absolute. Veyruin, her son, is one of her main opposers. He has the largest following on the surface, and the second largest overall among the Dark Seldarine. Lolth considers him her true rival and enemy. The other deities are minor players by comparison. The Dark Seldarine functions as a pantheon only loosely, as most Drow gods do not allow their followers to revere other deities. Instead, they are a collection of gods, some related and some not, whose followers are primarily Drow, making them bitter rivals, clashing over the hearts and minds of the Drow. Lolth's domination over the majority of Drow is so extensive that the information about other gods is not readily accessible. Veyron's existence and agenda are common knowledge only among the surface Drow and in parts of the Underdark where Lolth's power is not absolute. Elestrae, Lolth's daughter and the only benevolent Drow deity, is the subject of wildly inaccurate and false legends, both on the surface and in the Underdark. Most of the few who know of Kiran-Sali believe her to be an undead madwoman who is a goddess only in her fantasies, while Selvatarm is practically forgotten. Only Gaunadur is capable of making his presence known, or at least felt on some level by most Drow. The Dark Seldarine is a relatively young pantheon, as the Drow came into being only after Khorlan's descent, when the Dark Elves were cursed and transformed into the Drow around -10,000. Originally, the goddess Lolth, then known as Araneas, and the twin deities born from her union with Khorlan, were gods of the Dark Elves and part of the Seldarine, residing in Arvandur. Gaunadur is a very ancient deity, far older than Eo, according to Lolth, and rumored to have emerged from the primordial ooze itself. In that age, Gaunadur was worshipped by slimes and other crawling creatures, many of which possess an alien intelligence. Kiran-Sali is a dark elven lich from the world of Theranodi. After being banished by her husband, the king, for her experiments on undeath, she managed to raise an army of undead and exacted revenge upon the inhabitants of her former world, rendering it entirely lifeless. She fled from the Seldarine's revenge into the Abyss, where she ascended to divinity as a demigoddess. In -30,000, Araneas, with the help of her son Veyron, gathered a host of evil deities opposed to the Seldarine and convinced them to attack Arvandur in an attempt to overthrow Khorlan. Gaunadur entered the fray on his own without being asked by anyone. Araneas had planned for the assault to ultimately fail, as her actual goal was for Khorlan to be killed during the battle so she could replace him as the Coronal of Arvandur. She tricked Elestrae into dangerously injuring her own father, but the conspiracy was ultimately thwarted by Sehanine Moonbow and Khorlan's life was saved. After her betrayal was revealed, Araneas was banished by Khorlan and turned into a demon, while Veyron was simply exiled. Even though she was cleared of all guilt, Elestrae chose to share her mother and brother's punishment, knowing that the Drow would need her light in the times to come. The wizard Mordenkainen recorded a different version of this story. According to him, all elves, including those who would become the deities of the Seldarine and the Dark Seldarine, emerged from the blood that Khorlan lost in a fight against Gruumsh. Like their god, the first elves had shape-changing powers and the freedom that came with it. Khorlan took some favorites and made them deities, among whom Lolth was the most privileged. Lolth argued that the elves should cast off their shape-changing powers in exchange for a fixed form that would allow them to gain dominion over everything. Every single elf agreed and chose such a form, but Khorlan was revolted by their decision and railed against Lolth. He was stopped with the argument that nobody of his blood should be attacked, and while he was contemplating this, Lolth attempted to murder him. Realizing the extent of Lolth's betrayal, many elves intervened to stop her, but some remained loyal to the Spider Queen. These loyalists became the Dark Elves and their gods, while Lolth became a demon lord of the Abyss. Elestrae, an exception to this version as well, did not side with Lolth, but still chose to follow the Dark Elves. Araneas took the demon name Lolth and made the 66th layer of the Abyss, the Demonweb pits, her new home. She struggled to gain control over the layer, fighting both Gaunadur and Kiran-Sali. Despite their efforts, neither could prevent Lolth from achieving supremacy. Kiran-Sali was subdued and became an unwilling vassal of the Spider Queen. Gaunadur, on the other hand, became the author of his own defeat. His failure to seduce and subsume Lolth drove him into a rage, leading him to kill and steal the intelligence of his worshippers, resulting in a significant loss of his own followers and power. Elestrae and Veyron were active on Toril, the home of the Dark Elves. Over time, Veyron gained significant influence in southern Faerûn, becoming a major patron of the Elves of Ilithir and driving their expansion of territory and power. Gaunadur's faith also took root in Ilithir, filling a similar but secondary role. Elestrae strove against her brother's corruption of the Ilithiri, but her efforts were largely in vain, gaining only small groups of Dark Elf followers in the region. Lolth's attention turned towards Toril after the moon elf Cathiralia Amaryllis intruded into the Demonweb to retrieve her lover. Kiran-Sali helped her find her way, and Lolth did not interfere with the elf's mission. By this point, Lolth had conceived the idea of regaining her divinity and used her scrying magic to learn more about Toril. She was immediately intrigued by the presence of Dark Elf followers of Faerûn and delighted by the ambition and ruthlessness of the Ilithiri. She decided to spread her influence among them, using them as instruments of her vengeance. During this era, the Green and Dark Elven Kingdom of Myaratar was founded by political refugees from Aravandar. Elestrae became a major patroness of that nation, which would later grow into one of the greatest centers of magic and art in Faerûn. Lolth continued to spread her influence among the Dark Elves of Ilithir, poisoning the formerly peaceful relationships between Ilithir and the newer Elven realms. This led to the casting of the First Sundering in negative 17,600 to create a Dark Elf-free piece of land. The collateral damage caused the destruction of a significant portion of Ilithir, including its capital at Tornash, and resulted in the death of many followers of Faerûn. The Masked Lord's influence waned with the loss of his worshippers, and his efforts were further undermined by the ongoing conflict with Elestrae, granting Lolth and Gaunador the opportunity to fill the void. Lolth ascended as the chief deity of the Dark Seldarine, transforming Drow society into a harsh theocracy dominated by women, where males are treated as inferior. Under the guise of eliminating the weak to enhance the race's strength, she incited constant infighting among the Drow, all aimed at avenging Corellon. However, this was a ruse, as Lolth relished in the chaos and never genuinely pursued this revenge. To maintain her rule, she instructs her clergy to resist any change and prevent the Drow from aspiring to return to the surface. Faerûn opposes his mother's dominance and oppression over the Drow. His aim is to dismantle the order imposed by Lolth, unite the Drow, and reclaim their place on the surface that was lost after the Crown Wars. He especially attracts male Drow with his message of gender equality and those who seek societal, economic, or territorial progress for the Drow, as well as those on the surface. Unable to confront his mother directly, he worked covertly to disrupt her existing order. The Masked Lord has garnered the second largest following among Drow deities, with the most significant number of followers on the surface, making him Lolth's primary adversary. Elestrae endeavors to be a nurturing goddess, offering her people hope for a new life. She aims to lead them back to the light and help them rediscover love, kindness, and joy which was taken from them. Her vision is for the Drow to thrive in harmony with other races, free from Lolth's oppression and internal conflict. Despite many obstacles and setbacks, Elestrae has persisted in her struggle for her people. Her ideals starkly contrast with the mindset instilled by Lolth, and only a few Drow follow her. After nearly losing her church, it wasn't until centuries later that her faith saw a resurgence in Faerûn. Gaunador's followers among the Drow are those who have grown weary of Lolth's oppression and seek alternatives. However, the deity is largely indifferent to anything beyond his own ambitions, including his own followers, which keep his influence limited. Nevertheless, his presence thrives in cities plagued by conflict or where other Drow gods have less influence. Kiaran Sali managed to gain some independence from Lolth by killing Orcus and taking over the cold plain of Thanatos. She attempted to erase all records of his name to attract followers to her own worship. Despite these efforts, she remains relatively obscure, even among Drowkind. Selvatarm, the son of Faerûn, and Zandalar the Dancer, an elven goddess revered by the elves of the Yorwood, joined the Dark Seldarine long after the Crown Wars. Zandalar, seeing her people attacked by Lolth's minions, sought Faerûn's aid and tried to seduce him to gain his support against the Spider Queen. However, Faerûn eventually betrayed and imprisoned her. Zandalar later escaped with the help of Bast, a Mulhorandi demigoddess, but not before conceiving Selvatarm, who she gave birth to shortly before gaining her freedom and merging with Bast to become Sharis. Selvatarm wandered in solitude for centuries after rejecting both his parents, until he was discovered and befriended by his aunt, Elestrae. He grew very close to her, admiring her goodness and valuing her teachings. Elestrae hoped that by guiding and redeeming him, Selvatarm could become a role model to help heal the rift between the Dark Elves and the Seldarine. However, this hope was shattered in the late 3rd century when Lolth deceived Selvatarm into killing Zanasu, a demon lord who claimed power over spiders and was a rival to Lolth. She promised Selvatarm that this act would earn him Elestrae's favor. After slaying the demon, Selvatarm was overwhelmed by its demonic essence, turning completely evil and becoming Lolth's champion. Lolth orchestrated this to prevent Elestrae from gaining a new powerful ally. During the time of troubles, Lolth briefly appeared in Menzo Berezan. Among her actions on Toril, she spread rumors about a goddess from another world named Zinzirena and took on the aspect of Moander, the deceased god of corruption and decay, in an attempt to attract more followers on the surface. Selvatarm also appeared in Arindlin during the time of troubles, causing chaos until he was driven away by the combined efforts of Gaunador and Faerûn's followers. This event earned him a modest follower base in Toril. Elestrae manifested to mortals at least once during the time of troubles. She appeared in the High Forest at a location later known as Dark Maiden's Leap, rescuing a group of Drow refugees and leading them to safety at the Temple of the Promenade. Zinzirena, known as the Hunted, was more than just a rumor spread by Lolth. She actually appeared on Toril. Lolth killed her as part of an experiment to understand the mechanics of divine power distribution and absorption, thereby acquiring Zinzareno's portfolio in the process. Another deity option for the Drow is Malak, a Drow lich who ascended to godhood as the patron of wild magic following the Time of Troubles, at least in the minds of his Drow worshippers. In reality, Malak is an aspect of Talos. He gained significant popularity among Drow arcane spellcasters, prompting Lolth to provide these spellcasters with spells to maintain their allegiance to her. This competition ended when the new Mistra, after the Time of Troubles, stopped Talos from infringing on her own dominion of magic. In the year of wild magic, 1372, Lolth entered a period of hibernation known as the Silence of Lolth, lasting about a year. Her objective was to elevate herself to a greater deity and transform the Demonweb pits into a divine realm separate from the Abyss. During this time, she ceased granting spells to all her priestesses. The other members of the Dark Seldarine used this opportunity to expand their influence and increase their follower base. This period was marked by significant upheaval among the Drow. Lolth entered her comatose state without notifying her clergy. In response, the Drow of Menzoberranzan dispatched an investigation team led by Kenthel Bainray to uncover the cause of Lolth's silence. After witnessing the fall of Ched Nasad and realizing the loss of magic among Lolth's priestesses was not limited to Menzoberranzan, the team traveled to Cormanthor. They sought the assistance of a priest of Veyron to understand what had happened to their goddess. Bainray's group finally secured the cooperation of a cleric of the Masked Lord who could guide them to the Demonweb pits with the assistance of his god. However, the group was betrayed by the cleric, who summoned Veyron as part of a plan to attack the defenseless Lolth. Although Lolth was severely injured, Selvtarm intervened to defend her, resulting in a fierce battle between her grandson and her son, which ultimately saved Lolth's life. As Lolth was on the verge of awakening, she called for her chosen candidates, Kenthel Bainray, Halista Melarn, and Danafe Yontir. She required one of her priestesses to come to the Demonweb pits to be her chosen, thereby completing her transformation. The Masked Lord made another attempt on his mother's life. Since he was banned from entering her realm, he made a deal with the Yugoloth in Thrasis, offering to assassinate his superior in exchange for killing Lolth's chosen candidates. This arrangement aimed to ensure the promotion of the Fiend and the elimination of Lolth's chosen. One of the candidates, Halistra Melarn, had converted to the worship of Elestrae. The Dark Maiden chose her new priestess to kill Lolth with an artifact known as the Crescent Blade. Halistra, along with two fellow priestesses of the Dark Maiden, ventured to the Demonweb pits. However, they were defeated by Kenthel and Danafe's group, resulting in the death of one of the Dark Dancers. Believing the Dark Maiden had betrayed her, Halistra killed her remaining companion and reverted to worshipping Lolth. Thrasis also failed in his attempt, and Lolth chose Danafe Yontir as her Yorthe, completing her transformation. Kenthel was sent back to Toril, and Halistra was turned into the Lady Penitent, Lolth's chosen, tasked with killing the followers of Corellon, Elestrae, and Veyron as punishment for her previous heresy. The Crescent Blade was left broken in the Demonweb pits. Even after Lolth emerged from her silence, the deities of the Dark Seldarine continued to vie for dominance over the Drow. In 1375, Lolth persuaded Elestrae to engage in a divine game of Sava with the fate of the Drow at stake, and the outcome determining the surviving deity. Elestrae accepted, viewing it as a chance to liberate her people from Lolth's oppression. Selvatarm participated as Lolth's champion, directing his judicators to launch attacks on Elestrae's shrines and temples. Meanwhile, Veyron and his followers devised a plan to kill Lolth. The scheme involved Veyron killing Elestrae to absorb her portfolio and unite the churches, thereby gaining enough power to confront and kill Lolth. Lolth's new chosen, Halistra Melarn, informed the leader of the Church of Elestrae, as well as Cavatina Zaran, a Darksong Knight, about the location of the Crescent Blade. Cavatina was sent to the Demonweb pits to retrieve the sword, which she found intact but possessed by a Wendonai. Selvatarm attempted to strike at the core of his aunt's forces, with his followers attacking the promenade of the Dark Maiden. However, his efforts eventually failed. In the year of Risen Elfkin, 1375, the defenders of the promenade defeated the attackers, and Cavatina Zaran, aided by the Lady Penitent, killed Selvatarm in the Demonweb pits. This led to the near-complete absorption of his church into Lolth's domain. It was later revealed that Lolth had orchestrated her grandson's downfall from the beginning. On the same date, Veyron managed to infiltrate his sister Elestrae's realm to assassinate her. This attempt failed, and Elestrae emerged victorious and transformed, holding both her and her brother's portfolios and gaining the title of Masked Lady. Some of Veyron's followers joined Elestrae, while others aligned themselves with different deities like Shar, or continued their old faith, unaware of their god's demise, eventually forming the Skulkers of Veyron. In 1377, Kieran Sali also joined the gamble. Her crones attempted to bring the army of Deathheart to Toril, which inadvertently increased the phase rest of the Underdark, interfering with divination and teleportation magic. To counter this, Karland Melarn and his students apparently erased Kieran Sali's name from every living being's memory, effectively killing her. Following an assault on the Acropolis of Thanatos, Kieran Sali's undead clerics vanished and the mortal ones were rendered powerless. In 1378, Gaunadar began actively engaging in the power struggles between deities. In 1379, his followers attempted to free their god's avatar in the promenade of the Dark Maiden. His chosen tried to lead the invaders into a trap, but a group of former followers of Veyruin intentionally sabotaged their plan, leading to the liberation of Gaunadar's avatar. Though Naxil, another priest of the Masked Lady, managed to imprison the avatar, the promenade fell. Using the temple's portal network, Gaunadar's followers inflicted heavy losses on the Church of Elistray. Alistra Melarn attempted to be worshipped as a demigoddess but failed, and at best was only seen as a servant of Lolth. Under Lolth's orders, she killed many of Elistray's followers. In 1379, while Elistray was inhabiting the body of one of her priestesses, she tried to free Halistra from her torment and convince her to kill the Spider Queen. However, Wendanai influenced Halistra to slay both the priestess and the Masked Lady. Meanwhile, Melarn conducted a high elven magic ritual, with some initial assistance from Elistray, intended to sever the link between the phase rest and the Drow who do not worship Lolth. The spell inadvertently transformed hundreds of followers of the Dark Dancer and non-Illitheri Drow into their original Dark Elven form without their consent. Corlan Larithian took these transformed souls under his protection, allowing them into Arvandor, where the souls of Elistray's followers already resided. Corlan's servants claim that the transformation saves the willing and that the unwilling are cast down as a necessary sacrifice. Later, Lolth attempted to destroy Gaunadar, but underestimated his powers. He successfully escaped the Demonweb pits and established a new realm in the deep caverns. Around 1480, Lolth attempted to become the goddess of magic by creating her own demon weave, aiming for equal reverence from both clerics and wizards. She instructed her drow through Danafe Yantir to gather artifacts sacred to Mystra and control magical locations. Once they had collected enough magical energy, the demon weave was completed. However, Lolth lacked the necessary skill and understanding to maintain a weave, resulting in her creation merely leeching power and stability from Mystra's damaged weave. The demon weave would have quickly collapsed, potentially destroying Mystra's resurgent weave, had it not been tended to by Elminster Almar, Storm Silverhand, the Srinshi, and others. Despite this, the demon weave allowed Lolth to grant arcane magic access to a select few, and her loyal clerics and wizards grew stronger, using their enhanced power to darken the sky on the surface, enabling them to remain active there. The rise of wizards in status due to this new order caused turmoil in the gendered Lolthite society, as it suggested equality between female priestesses and male wizards. Lolth planned to resolve this by favoring females and excluding males from both divine and arcane magic. However, before she could act, in the late fall of 1485, a group of adventurers from Laurar descended into the ruins of Arendlin. They assisted a resurgent Mystra in defeating Lolth and taking control of the demon weave. Mystra then began using it to bolster her own weave, aiming to restore it closer to its pre-spell-plagued state. During the 1480s, the overgod Eo separated the twin worlds of Aber and Toril and rewrote the Tablets of Fate, an artifact containing the name of every deity and their portfolio, in an event known as the Second Sundering. This allowed many deities of Toril, who were considered dead or lost, to return to life. After about a century of total dominance, Lolth had to witness the revival of the Dark Seldarine. Elistray and Veyruin returned to life in Flame Rule of 1489. Elistray reclaimed her title of Dark Maiden, and she and her brother resumed their roles as separate deities with the same power and portfolios they had before 1375. Despite Garland's ritual, Elistray remained a Drow goddess, with most of her followers still being Drow. After their time together as the Masked Lady, the siblings had developed a mutual understanding, respect, and even friendship. Although their followers continued to skirmish, all conflicts between the two deities themselves ceased. Both deities made their return known by manifesting through their avatars to their followers, who enthusiastically spread the word. Elistray, in particular, was seen dancing and speaking to mortals in various locations, especially along the Sword Coast. In Waterdeep, she was witnessed dancing in the moonlight near the city's walls along the road to Amphail. Elistray was also one of the deities with whom the returned Mystra shared the weave after the Second Sundering. Kieran Sali and Seltarm were also restored to life during the Second Sundering. Kieran Sali's return was possible because her name had not been fully erased by Karlan's ritual. It was still remembered and invoked in necromantic rituals in the late 1480s. The other members of the Dark Seldarine are generally of minor importance, and Lolth's attitude toward them is derisive. She considers her daughter Elestrae to be an insignificant fool, a moody girl who can be easily manipulated to serve her purposes. Elestrae's followers refer to Lolth as the Tyrant Poisoner. Gaunadar is a different story. She fears the possibility that he could influence the Drow towards his cause, but he is not concerned enough with Drow matters to attract many of them. Kieran, Sali, and Selvatarm are her allies who serve her. Lolth is an enemy of the Seldarine, especially Corlan Lorathian, her former husband, as well as Sehanine Moonbow for thwarting her scheme to overthrow Corlan, and Fenmarel Mestarine, her partner in adultery who ultimately did not join her betrayal. Despite her deep hatred, she does not actually put significant effort into acting on it, preferring to keep the Drow embroiled in infighting rather than united against those she considers her enemies. She once helped Grumsh attempt to kill Corlan Lorathian, but after this failure, they became enemies. She also has a long list of enemies among Underdark deities. Lolth occasionally allies with Loviatar and Malar. Some believe there may be an ancient pact between Lolth and the Dwargar deity of Laudagware due to his race's use of steeders and her never being known to use them as minions. Lolth's follower base is diverse. It mainly consists of Drow, but also includes Araneas, Chitines, Dragoloths, and Deep Dragons. She has gained a few elven followers and has tried to attract more worshippers by assuming the aspect of Moander, a deity of rot. Her ultimate goal is to maintain absolute control over the Dark Elves, prevent the rise of alternative faiths or ideas, and avoid complacency, although she finds amusement in the strife that her followers' communities create. In the long run, her influence hinders the growth and success of her Drow followers, preventing them from uniting against common enemies or for a common cause. Any attempt by the Drow to emulate Lolth is doomed to fail because, unlike other humanoids, their arachnid deity lacks their form or psychology. They are ashamed that they cannot fully live up to her demands, and in truth, the Spider Queen is one they can never truly please. Any boon she grants only serves to escalate conflict and cause further strife, as she ultimately cares nothing for them. Lolth's clerics are predominantly female, though there are a few males. They serve as rulers in most Lolthite communities and strictly follow the Spider Queen's will, enforcing extreme subservience to their deity and maintaining a constant state of conflict. Each priestess strives for the Spider Queen's favor and is willing to do anything to gain status in her eyes. They sacrifice the living and treasure for her glory, and their vestments are typically adorned with spider motifs. Their rituals require them to wear darker clothes or none at all. The militant Myrlokar, also known as the Order of Soul Spiders, is an elite fighting organization composed exclusively of male crusaders, found in dark elven cities where Lolth is worshipped and males are allowed into her priesthood. They serve the reigning matron mothers of the city and are employed to eliminate their targets, usually being used continuously until they're killed. The Handmaidens of the Spider Queen, also called the Daughters of Yochlol, are an order of female crusaders with no ties to specific deities. They are used when Lolth wants to bring an entire city back in line. At least 3 times in recorded history, the Handmaidens have destroyed entire Drow cities to prevent them from straying too far from Lolth. One of their usual tasks is to terrorize merchants who take Veyruun as their patron, as well as settlements run by followers of Veyruun or Gaunadar, or anywhere those faiths are practiced. The details of Lolth's rebellion have faded into obscurity, made vague by the endless nature of the Feywild and twisted by shadows and echoes, making her initial act of betrayal uncertain. Even Sehanine and Corlan can't determine if her descent was a long-held belief or sparked by a specific event. Some prophecies hint that the discord began before Arvandor was fully formed, when the orc deity Grumsh, Corlan's enduring adversary, attempted to obliterate it. Despite respecting Corlan's wish to confront Grumsh alone, Lolth secretly admired his fury and at some point engaged with him. Her inner passions darkened to the extent that she allied with the Abyssal Lords, but they merely facilitated her corruption. They were not the cause of her downfall. Regardless of the motives or timeline, Arashni's jealousy of her husband and dissatisfaction with her role grew. Although Corlan granted her nearly everything she requested, her true desire was for power that could only be seized, and her ambition was to dominate the Seldarine. Gradually her bond with the elves weakened due to her deceit. In her initial attempt to betray Corlan, she helped Grumsh by enchanting the scabbard she had made for Corlan's sword to shatter during their duel. However, their scheme was thwarted by Sehanine Moonbow, who knew of Arashni's tampering because she executed this first act of treachery at night under Sehanine's watchful gaze. Later, Arashni provoked Malar into attacking the injured Corlan after witnessing the Beast Lord slay the orc god Herne on Faerun. However, this plan also failed as Corlan managed to drive him away. Arashni then orchestrated a coalition of deities hostile to the Seldarine, forming an army to assault Arvandor and overthrow Corlan. The army was so poorly organized that Arashni was certain of their failure. Her real scheme was to return the cursed scabbard to Corellon, ensuring that during the ensuing battle, arrows fired by Elestrea would strike him, potentially killing him and making her daughter the scapegoat. Before the anti-Seldarine faction could attack, Sehanine confronted Arashni about her treachery. Aware of Arashni's betrayal, Sehanine was quickly overpowered and imprisoned by her, with the assistance of her son Veyrun. Together they ensured that Elestrea would find and deliver the scabbard to Corellon and be near him during the battle. Once the battle began, Arashni's plan nearly succeeded, bolstered by Gaunadar's intervention. When an ogre god charged at the immobilized Corellon, Elestrea quickly fired arrows to protect her father. However, the cursed scabbard redirected the projectiles towards Corellon, almost killing him. Despite this, the anti-Seldarine army was defeated and retreated as expected. After the battle, Arashni attempted to poison Corellon with a concoction made by Elestrea, disguised as a healing water from Elysium. The scheme failed due to Sehanine's timely intervention. The Lady of Dreams had escaped Veyrun's prison at great personal cost. Sehanine, Ardri Fania, and Hanali Solano merged into the triune goddess Angarad and used their combined power to save Corellon. When Corellon regained consciousness, a trial was convened. Veyrun and Elestrea were exiled from the Seldarine. Elestrea chose exile willingly, foreseeing that the Dark Elves would need her guidance and hope in the future. Arashni was stripped of most of her divine power and transformed into a Tanari with the form of a giant spider. Corellon could not bring himself to destroy her, and instead banished her into the abyss, instructing her to join the demons she had come to resemble. Enraged by her defeat, she made one last attempt on Corellon's life, but was thwarted and overpowered by him. Despite everything, Corellon still loved her and could not bring himself to kill her, allowing her to escape into the abyssal portal. Having secured her dominion, Lolth plotted revenge against Corellon. Unable to strike directly at him, she aimed to be worshipped by the elves, bringing them misery and, by extension, tormenting Corellon. Lolth found the southern empire of Ilithir particularly appealing due to its wealth, cosmopolitan nature, and especially the ferocity, ambition, and decisiveness of its people. Originally, Ilithir and the other elven nations were not openly hostile, but Lolth sowed discord and instigated conflicts. This unrest prompted the elves to create a land free of dark elves, leading to the First Sundering. This event split a region of the continent from the mainland to form an island, resulting in numerous casualties, including a significant portion of Veyrun's followers. Veyrun's attempts to counter this were hindered by his ongoing feud with Elestrea, allowing Lolth and Gaunadar to exploit the situation. Lolth's schemes eventually led to the Crown Wars. A legend among the half-elven Crinti of the Shining South tells of an Ilithiri wizard known only as the Spider Queen. This wizard accidentally crossed into the realm of the Unseelie Court, where she endured their dark fae magic and torment, but managed to escape. Though driven insane by her experiences, she gained immense power and became the most powerful spellcaster in Ilithir. Eventually, Lolth absorbed the Spider Queen, taking her title, powers, and her fear of the Unseelie. This fear was then passed down to her Drow offspring and subsequently to the Crinti half-elves. The story is preserved in tomes and libraries found in Halruaa. For Lolth, the Crown Wars were a prime chance to gain dominance over the Dark Elves and simultaneously seek revenge against the Seldarine. Lolth's influence grew significantly during the Second Crown War. Aravindar, the Sun Elf nation, launched a military campaign against the Dark Elves of Myaritar, which eventually led to the catastrophic Dark Disaster. To avenge their Myaritar cousins, and out of fear that Aravindar might similarly target Ilithir, the Ilithiri joined the war against the Elven Empire. The Ilithiri Coronal summoned Wendenai, a Balor serving Lolth, and obtained power from it. Seizing this opportunity, Lolth worked quickly to bring the Dark Elves under her control. Other noble families in Ilithir followed suit, summoning more demonic allies provided by Veyrun, Kiaran-Sali, and Gaunadar. While these actions increased their influence, Lolth's power grew even more as Wendenai's taint spread through the noble bloodlines. During this period, the Ilithiri were still developing their worship practices. They recognized Lolth as a spider deity and knew that the other gods and goddesses, who would later be known as the Dark Seldarine, had some form of relationship with her. However, they did not fully understand the dynamics between these deities. As a result, the Ilithiri experimented with depicting these gods as spider deities, which offended Lolth, Veyrun, Gaunadar, and Kiaran-Sali so deeply that they all killed their high priests in retaliation. During the Fourth Crown War, the elves' plea for divine intervention, the growing worship of Lolth among the Ilithiri, and the corruption of their leaders by Wendenai's influence led the elves to convene at the Elven Court. There they summoned the power of the Seldarine to curse the Dark Elves, transforming them into the Drow. The combined elven nations then forcibly drove the newly formed Drow race underground. In the Underdark, the Drow initially lived in a primitive state, with Elestrae's power severely weakened due to the loss of her followers, and Veyrune, Kiran-Sali, and Gaunadar unable to match Lolth's influence. Lolth emerged as the primary deity of the Drow. She gathered them and encouraged the establishment of their first city, Talantawar. However, internal conflicts eventually led to the city's destruction, causing the Drow to disperse throughout the Underdark. The Demonweb pits, also referred to as Lolth's Web, originally formed the 66th layer of the Abyss. When Kenthel Bainray and her companions visited the Demonweb pits during the Silence of Lolth in 1372, they found the realm strangely devoid of souls. It consisted of a vast black emptiness with an acrid smell, and was interspersed with giant spiderwebs. The temperature was extremely hot, and the area was strewn with the corpses of monsters and demons. Lolth resided in a black temple suspended within the web, its entrance marked by her stone visage. Upon their return in the Year of Rogue Dragons, Kenthel's new expedition found the Demonweb pits deserted and in ruins. They discovered a gate guarded by abyssal widows that led to the newly formed Demonweb pits. A new Demonweb pits is a plain filled with rocky terrain, chasms, and gorges. The landscape is dotted with numerous pits and craters appearing lifeless. Giant petrified spiders and webbing from song spiders covers everything. During the day, a distant red sun is visible, and at night, 8 bright red stars shine. A river of souls flows into Lolth's city, an iron citadel in the infinite web. Lolth stands atop a dais in a temple on a pyramid with webs adorning the walls. The plain features several notable geographical landmarks, such as the Plains of Soulfire and the Pass of the Soul Reaver at the base of the Mountain of Eyes. It is inhabited by spiders, including song spiders and tridentches. The Soul Reaver, a gray spectral form with a bloated serpentine body containing screaming drow souls, dwells in the Pass of the Soul Reaver. Following the Second Sundering, Lolth returned to her realm in the Abyss. Lolth resides in a massive iron fortress that moves on spider-like legs according to her will. By the end of the Silence of Lolth, she had relocated her domain in the Demonweb pits to its own planar space. Veyrune maintains a realm named Araneas, where he constantly schemes against his mother, a behavior that Lolth actually encourages. Elestrae also has a place in the Demonweb pits, but her domain in the Demonweb pits is nearly abandoned, and she usually resides in Arvandor. Kiran-Sali has her own bone citadel called Thanatos in a desolate area of the plain, named after her own lair of the Abyss, which was stolen from her by the reincarnated demon prince Orcus. Gaunadar dwells at the very bottom of the pits, surrounded by slime and fungus that emit multicolored lights. Selvatarm resides with the Spider Queen and does not maintain a realm of his own. Following the Second Sundering, Lolth was no longer the unrivaled goddess of the Drow, although she retained her dominant position. The revival of the deceased members of the Dark Seldarine diminished her supremacy. Elestrae and Veyrune reached a truce and even reciprocal friendship after their return, allowing them to concentrate their efforts on common goals instead of fighting each other. The wizard Mordenkainen noted that after the Second Sundering, Veyrune dramatically shifted from his earlier stance of rebellion against Lolth's system to one of subservience to the Spider Queen. He came to embody the ideal of a drow male according to the Lolthite matriarchy, quote, swift, silent, and obedient. Veyrune's faith is now said to be acceptable in Lolth-controlled cities, and is often practiced by males who seek a better life without openly challenging Lolth's rule, rather than by those who aim to overthrow the system entirely. Lolth's plan for the Drow is ultimately one of maintaining power through division and fear. By ensuring her followers remain embroiled in endless conflicts and power struggles, she keeps them from uniting against her or aspiring for a better existence. Her influence has been characterized by cruelty and manipulation, which ensures the Drow remain subservient to her whims, trapped in a cycle of violence and mistrust that stunts their potential for growth and unity. Lolth's manipulative nature extends to all aspects of mainstream Drow life, promoting acts of treachery and violence to prove loyalty and worthiness. Her capriciousness means that even her most loyal followers can find themselves suddenly out of favor. This constant state of flux keeps the Drow in a perpetual state of fear and paranoia, ensuring their absolute obedience and preventing any cohesive rebellion. Despite her overwhelming influence, Lolth's dominance has faced challenges. The resurgence of deities such as Elestrae and Veyrune, who offer alternative paths and ideologies to the Drow, indicates that her control, while extensive, is not absolute. This has been a mere introduction to mainstream Drow society in the Underdark. There's a great deal more information concerning the history of Drow houses, and biographies of notable Drow individuals and adventurers can give some insight into their mentality. There is also a significant amount of information and history on the surface Drow, as well as their societies and beliefs, which differ significantly from the mainstream Lolthite Drow in the Underdark. These individuals and groups who have emerged from the shadow of the Spider Queen challenge her vision for domination and conformity among all the Dark Elves of the Forgotten Realms. By the light of the water-deep moon, I want to dance. With my love I will sing a tune. I was killed by Mom and Brother Veyroon. Your shimmering glow will make love flow. We'll be dancing quite soon by the water-deep moon. By the light of the water-deep moon, I want to dance. With my love I will sing a tune. Was killed by Mom and Brother Veyroon. Your shimmering glow will make love flow. We'll be dancing quite soon